I heard the news that my son was in the emergency room while I was driving on the road. When I arrived, my wife told me to sign the bone marrow donation papers to save him, even though I still didn't know his condition and hadn't been able to see him. She kept rushing me, giving me no time to process anything. Then after the doctor examined me and ran the tests, he pushed the result file toward me and said, "Stay calm. This paper could change your entire family." After I finished reading it, my hands were trembling and I couldn't say a word. Now I finally understood why my wife had been in such a hurry. I'm glad you're here with me today. Before we dive in, leave a comment and tell me, have you ever had to redefine what family means to you? Just yes or no. I read every response. Please note some details have been adjusted for storytelling purposes, but the message about what truly makes a family is what matters most. The phone rang at 11:47 p.m. on a Sunday, shattering the silence of the bus depot where I sat checking camera logs, and the unknown Atlanta number on the screen made my chest tighten before I even answered. My name is Vernon Caldwell. I'm 57 years old, and I drive a yellow school bus through the northern suburbs of Forsyth County, Georgia. Same road I've driven for 9 years. Same children's faces every morning. Same parking spot at the Cumming Depot where I sit most Sunday nights alone, reviewing the week's dashboard footage. It's a quiet routine. Disciplined. Safe. That phone call ended all of that. "Mr. Caldwell, this is Scottish Rite Hospital in Atlanta. Your son Kieran is in our emergency room. You need to come immediately." The nurse's voice was steady, professional, the kind of calm that medical people learn when delivering bad news. I stood up from the driver's seat of bus number 43, my hand already reaching for my keys on the dash. "Is he breathing?" I asked. "Yes, but his condition is critical. How soon can you be here?" 40 minutes. I hung up. Didn't call my wife Denise, didn't call my older son Thane. Just locked the depot gate behind me, got into my green Chevy Silverado and drove. In that moment between the nurse's words and my response, I became every father who'd ever received a call like this. And none of them. Because you never really know what that moment feels like until it's yours. Until it's your son. Until the word critical is attached to a boy whose name you chose 15 years ago, whose first steps you watched, whose face you see every morning at the breakfast table asking for extra syrup on his pancakes. Kieran, 15 years old, sophomore at West Forsyth High School, plays clarinet in the school band, gets B's in most subjects, A's in history. My son. The drive from Cumming to Atlanta at midnight is empty highway and bad thoughts. Every red light felt like a personal attack. Every mile marker was a reminder that I wasn't there yet, that I didn't know what critical meant, that a nurse had called me instead of my wife. Why hadn't Denise called me herself? I pushed the Silverado to 80 on Highway 400, hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. You know that drive, the one where your mind runs through every worst-case scenario, where you bargain with God even though you haven't been to church in 5 years, where you promise things you can't deliver if he'll just let your child be okay. I made that drive in 32 minutes. Scottish Rite Hospital sits in North Atlanta, a children's hospital I'd driven past 100 times but never thought I'd enter at 1 in the morning. The parking deck was nearly empty. I took the elevator to the third-floor pediatric wing, following the signs to the emergency department, my work boots loud on the polished tile. That's where I saw her. Denise, my wife of 18 years, stood at the corridor's end near a set of double doors marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Her hair was unusually neat for 1 a.m., pulled back in a neat ponytail, not the messy bun she wore to bed. She had on her black Ralph Lauren coat, the one she saved for important occasions, and she was typing on her phone. She looked up when she heard my footsteps. Didn't run to me. Didn't cry. Just put the phone in her coat pocket and walked toward me with a measured pace, her expression composed. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Thank you for coming," like I'd shown up to help her move furniture. "Where is he?" I asked. "Behind those doors. The doctor said Kieran needs a bone marrow transplant. You're the best match. You need to sign some papers first." I stopped walking. "Sign papers," I repeated. "I haven't seen him. I haven't spoken to the doctor. Why sign papers first?" Denise reached into her other coat pocket and pulled out a folded stack of forms. To get it done quickly, you know how you forget paperwork. I've never forgotten paperwork in my life. 9 years as a school bus driver means 9 years of daily logs, safety checklists, route confirmations, incident reports. My filing system at home has color-coded folders for insurance, taxes, medical records, and vehicle maintenance. Denise knows this. She's complained about it, called me obsessive, said I care more about organization than spontaneity. So why would she say I forget paperwork? "I need to see Kieran first," I said. "Vernon, please. The doctor said time is critical. Just sign so they can start the process." She held out a pen, black ink, hospital logo on the side. Her hand was steady. That's when I knew something was wrong. Not wrong with Kieran, though. That was wrong too, terribly wrong, but wrong with this moment. Wrong with my wife standing in a hospital corridor at 1:15 in the morning, hair-perfect coat pressed, asking me to sign papers before letting me see my dying son. A mother whose child is in critical condition doesn't have neat hair. She doesn't remember to grab her good coat. She doesn't stand in hallways typing on her phone with steady hands and composed expressions. She runs. She cries. She grabs your arm and pulls you toward the room, desperate for you to see him, to help him, to do something, anything. Denise wasn't doing any of that. "I need to see him first," I said again. Something flickered across her face. Annoyance, maybe. or calculation. It passed quickly, replaced by a patient smile. "Of course," she said. "I just thought we could save time." She turned and walked toward the double doors, pulling out her phone again as she moved. I followed, watching the back of her head, the neat ponytail, the expensive coat. I've lived with this woman 18 years. I know the difference between worry and planning. I know the sound of her voice when she's scared versus when she's executing something she's thought through. At 1:15 a.m. on January 4th, standing in that hospital corridor with her phone in one hand and those papers in the other, my wife wasn't worried. She was calculating. Denise pushed open the double doors and I followed her past nurses' stations and quiet rooms. She stopped at room 318. The room was dim when I finally entered. The boy lying in that hospital bed, pale against white sheets, a V-line, running into his left arm, looked smaller than 15, smaller than the son I'd watched board my school bus every morning for years. Kieran. 15 years old. Brown hair dark against the white pillow, breathing shallow but steady. Monitors beeped softly, tracking numbers I didn't understand. Someone had covered him with a thin blanket that rose and fell with each breath. I moved toward the bed. "Kieran," I said quietly. He didn't wake. I touched his hand, cold, thinner than I remembered. How long had it been since I'd really looked at him? He'd been quieter lately, spending more time in his room, but I'd thought that was just teenage withdrawal. This wasn't normal. A soft knock made me turn. A woman in her early 50s stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp with professional concern. She carried herself with the efficient manner of someone who'd delivered difficult news before. "Mr. Caldwell," she said. "I'm Gail Whitaker, the transplant coordinator. I need to speak with you privately about the verification process before we begin compatibility testing." Denise stepped forward. "Is that really necessary? It takes more time." Gail's expression didn't change. "It is necessary, Mrs. Caldwell. This is protocol to protect both donor and recipient." She gestured toward the hallway. "There's a counseling room down the hall." I looked back at Kieran, his chest rising and falling, the monitors tracking his heartbeat, and followed Gail out. Denise walked close behind. I stood there watching my son's chest rise and fall with each shallow breath, and thought about every morning I'd open that bus door to let him on, never imagining one day I'd be standing beside a hospital bed wondering if I'd see him graduate. Counseling room 3. B was small and windowless, furnished with a round table and 4 chairs. Gail closed the door and sat down, pulling out a form. "This is the organ donation consent form," she said. "New UNOS regulations from November require verification of biological relationship before we proceed with compatibility testing. It's standard now for all living donors." I looked at the form. My name was already filled in Vernon Michael Caldwell. My birth date, March 15th, 1968. My address in Cumming. Everything complete in neat handwriting except the signature line. Gail's eyes moved from the form to my face. "Have you filled out this consent form before, Mr. Caldwell?" "No," I said. "I've never seen this form in my life." Denise made a small sound, half laugh, half sigh. "I filled it out for him to get it done quickly. He often forgets paperwork." Gail looked at Denise, then back at me. Her expression was professional, but her eyes asked a question she didn't voice. "I don't forget paperwork," I said quietly. 9 years as a school bus driver. Daily logs, safety checklists, route confirmations. I've never forgotten paperwork. Denise's hand went to her coat pocket. "Vernon, you're under stress. Let's just focus on getting Kieran help." "I am focused on Kieran," I said. I looked at Gail. "When did my wife give you this form?" Gail checked her clipboard. "Mrs. Caldwell arrived at 11 p.m. with Kieran in the ambulance. She provided this form to the intake nurse at 11:23. 11:23, 24 minutes before the hospital called me. Denise had already filled out my consent form with information only I should know, with signatures I should have provided before anyone told me my son was dying. When did my wife become someone who filled out my legal paperwork without asking? And when had she learned to lie so smoothly that even I almost believed her? "The form needs to be completed by the donor," Gail said. "Mr. Caldwell, I'll need you to fill out a fresh one, your own handwriting." She pulled out a blank form and placed it in front of me with a pen. "I'll give you both a moment," she said, standing. "Take your time." She left the room, closing the door with a soft click. I stared at the blank form. The questions were straightforward. Name, date of birth, relationship to recipient, medical history, understanding of risks, voluntary consent. Relationship to recipient. Father. I'd written that word on forms before: school enrollment, insurance claims, emergency contacts. Never thought about it, just wrote it automatically because it was true. "Wasn't it?" "Vernon," Denise said softly. "Please don't make this difficult. Kieran needs you. Just fill out the form." I picked up the pen and started writing. My name, my birth date, my address. Every answer in my own hand, every box filled by me this time. When I got to the signature line, I paused. Denise was watching me. Her expression was patient, concerned, the face of a worried wife supporting her husband through a crisis. But I'd seen her face in that hallway. I'd seen the neat hair and the pressed coat and the steady hands typing on her phone while our son lay in critical condition. I'd lived with this woman for 18 years. I knew when she was worried, and I knew when she was executing a plan. I signed my name, Vernon M. Caldwell. The pen scratched against the paper. As I wrote each letter, I felt the weight of something I couldn't name yet. When I signed that form again, I felt like I was signing into a war where I didn't know which side I was on. Gail knocked and re-entered, taking the completed form. She reviewed it quickly, nodded, and filed it in her clipboard. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell," she said. "We'll begin the compatibility testing first thing in the morning. The doctor will explain everything at 6 a.m. 6 a.m., 4.5 hours from now." I stood up, my legs stiff from the drive and the shock and the growing sense that nothing about this night was what it seemed. Denise stood too, smoothing her coat. "Can I sit with Kieran?" I asked Gail. "Of course," she said. "Room 318, as long as you need." I walked back down the hallway past the nurse's station back to my son's room. But the question followed me like a shadow. What else had my wife filled out without telling me, and why? I spent the hours between signing that form and dawn, sitting in Kieran's room, watching him breathe. The war I'd signed into didn't have clear battle lines yet, but I could feel them forming in the dark. When Thane Caldwell walked into the hospital cafeteria at 6:30 that Monday morning, still wearing his Forsyth County firefighter uniform with the faint smell of smoke clinging to his shoulders, I felt something in my chest loosen for the first time since the phone rang 18 hours earlier. My eldest son, 30 years old, built like the man who'd taught him to swing an axe and carry hose. He didn't say anything at first, just walked over to where I sat with cold coffee and placed his hand on my shoulder. That wordless solidarity said everything. "Dad," he said finally. "Thane." Margot Townsend appeared beside him in green nursing scrubs, her shift at Children's Healthcare clearly just ended. 29, with observant eyes that had learned to catalog details others missed. She bent down and kissed my cheek. "How's Kieran?" she asked. "Sleeping. They're running compatibility tests this morning." She glanced toward the hallway, then back at me. Her voice dropped. "Dad, last night I saw Mom standing in the hallway on the phone for about 45 minutes right after Kieran was moved to his room. She was laughing. I thought it was strange." I looked up at her. Laughing. Not like happy laughing, but laughing while she was on the phone. Margot's professional nurse expression flickered. It seemed odd for someone whose son just got admitted to emergency. Thane's jaw tightened. He pulled out a chair and sat down across from me. Behind him I noticed a stroller, Clover, my 2-year-old granddaughter, sleeping with a yellow plastic flower clutched in her small fist. A gift from the fire station that she'd carried everywhere for weeks. Clover woke up, looked at me with those wide 2-year-old eyes, and called out, "Grandpa." For the first time since arriving at this hospital, I didn't feel like I was drowning alone. I lifted her out of the stroller and held her. She pressed the plastic flower against my chest. "Pretty," she said. "Very pretty," I told her. Thane was watching me with an expression I'd seen before, the look of someone carrying weight they didn't know how to set down. "There's something I need to tell you, Dad," he said quietly. "But it's not the right time yet. You need to get through the compatibility test first." I set Clover back in her stroller, my hands suddenly cold. "Thane, what are you not telling me?" He shook his head. "After the test. I promise. But I need you to know whatever happens, we're here. Me, Margot, Clover. We're not going anywhere." That should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like preparation for something worse than I'd imagined. At 9 a.m., I sat in the hematology lab on the second floor while a technician drew blood and took tissue samples. Standard compatibility testing, they'd said, quick and routine. Dr. Farrah Sinclair entered midway through the procedure. She was a small woman, 50, with kind eyes and an efficient manner that immediately commanded respect. The kind of doctor who'd learned to deliver difficult news with both honesty and compassion. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, pulling up a chair beside the exam table, "I need to ask you some detailed questions about your family medical history, blood type, any hematological conditions, genetic disorders. Is something wrong with the test?" I asked. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm seeing some markers that require a more comprehensive panel. We'll have results within 48 hours. The technician finished drawing blood and labeled the vials with careful precision. Dr. Farrah watched, then pulled out her laptop and began typing. I sat there, the small bandage on my arm, watching her fingers move across the keyboard. She angled the screen slightly away from me, but not enough. I could see fragments of what she was typing. "Request full genetic panel expedited, 48 hours, flagged discordance in preliminary HLA loci." Discordance. I didn't need a medical degree to understand that word. Disagreement. Mismatch. Something that doesn't align. How many times have doctors hidden life-changing truths behind words we don't understand, giving us time to prepare or time to hope before the floor falls out? "What does HLA mean?" I asked. Dr. Farrah looked up from her laptop. "Human leukocyte antigen. They're genetic markers we use to determine compatibility for transplants. Everyone inherits them from their biological parents." Biological parents. She said it so casually, like it was just another medical term. But sitting in that lab chair with the smell of antiseptic in the air and the weight of 18 sleepless hours pressing down on me, those two words felt like a door opening onto something I'd never wanted to see. "And the discordance?" I asked. Her expression shifted, professional caution replacing easy explanation. "Let's wait for the full panel results. I don't want to jump to conclusions based on preliminary data. But there's a concern." "There's a question," she said carefully. "The comprehensive panel will answer it definitively." She closed her laptop and stood. 48 hours, Mr. Caldwell. In the meantime, Kieran is stable. The immediate crisis has passed. You should get some rest." "Rest," I'd been awake for nearly 24 hours, driven through the night to a hospital where my wife had filled out my paperwork without telling me where my eldest son carried secrets he wouldn't share, where a doctor was now flagging genetic discordance in a compatibility test that should have been routine. Rest seemed like something that belonged to a different life. I sat in that lab chair watching Dr. Farris Sinclair gather her laptop and notes. That word stayed on the screen in my mind: discordance, disagreement, mismatch. I didn't ask her to explain what it meant in plain English. A part of me already knew the answer would change everything. I wasn't ready. Whether I was ready or not didn't matter. The 48-hour clock had started, and while it ticked, other truths were already surfacing. Wayne Frost caught me in the third-floor hallway just after 10:30 that morning, his expression grave enough to make me follow him into his office without asking why. When he gestured for me to close the door behind me, I knew whatever he was about to show me wouldn't be good news. Wayne was the hospital social worker, 47, with a thick stack of files on his desk, and the look of a man who'd uncovered something that needed immediate attention. "Have a seat," he said. I sat. He opened a manila folder and pulled out a document with the hospital letterhead. "I was reviewing Kieran's intake records this morning. There's something you need to see." He slid the paper across the desk. It was a medical guardianship form. My name appeared in the first section under father/legal guardian, but the section marked primary medical decision maker listed only one name: Denise Marie Caldwell. Below that, a date, November 28, 2025. Below that, a notary seal. "Under Georgia law," Wayne said carefully, "a unilateral change of medical guardianship while both parents are still married is an unusual procedure. It needs investigation." "When did she do this?" I asked. "November 28th. He paused. "Do you remember what event was happening on November 28th? "Thanksgiving." I remember that day perfectly. Denise's parents' house in their gated community outside Atlanta. The long table with 14 people, her sisters, their husbands, cousins, nephews. Me carving the turkey while everyone laughed and talked about football. Denise pouring cider. Kieran and Brennan playing video games in the basement with their cousins. I'd thought we were a normal family celebrating together. Somewhere in that house on that day, while I carved turkey and drank cider and made small talk about the Falcons' losing season, my wife was signing papers, stripping me of medical rights over our son. More than a month before Kieran got sick. "She planned this," I said quietly. Wayne's expression didn't change, but his silence confirmed it. "What does this mean legally?" I asked. "It means Denise has sole authority to make medical decisions for Kieran. You can't override her choices. You can't access his full medical records without her consent. And if there's a dispute about treatment, she wins." "Yes." I stared at the notary seal. November 28th, 2025. A month and a week before the phone call that brought me to this hospital. Not a reaction to crisis. Preparation. "I'm filing a review with hospital administration," Wayne said. "This kind of unilateral change raises questions, but I wanted you to know first." I stood up, the paper still in my hand. "Thank you," I said. Wayne nodded. "One more thing. Be careful what you sign. Read everything, even if she tells you it's just routine." I left his office and walked down the hallway toward Kieran's room. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Somewhere a monitor beeped. A nurse pushed a cart past me, wheels squeaking on the polished floor. Everything looked normal, but nothing was. Room 318's door was half open when I arrived. I knocked softly and pushed it the rest of the way. Kieran was awake. For the first time since I'd arrived at this hospital, my son's eyes were open and looking at me. He was sitting up, slightly propped against pillows, the IV still running into his arm. He stiffened when he saw me. Not fear exactly, more like reflex. An old habit of pulling back that broke something inside my chest. "Hey, buddy," I said quietly. "Dad." His voice was hoarse from sleep and medication. I pulled a chair beside his bed and sat down. Up close, he looked thinner than I remembered. Paler. The hospital gown hung loose on his shoulders. "How are you feeling?" I asked. "Tired." He glanced at the IV bag, then back at me. "Dad, does it hurt the donation procedure? Does it hurt you?" Of all the questions he could have asked about his diagnosis, about his chances, about why he was here, he asked about me. "Don't worry about me, buddy," I said. "You focus on getting better." He nodded slowly, but his eyes stayed on my face like he was searching for something he'd lost. "I'm sorry," he said suddenly. About what happened this morning. He stopped mid-sentence, swallowed the rest of his words. His eyes darted toward the door. "Checking. Making sure no one was listening outside. What kind of fear does a mother have to put into a 15-year-old boy to make him check the door before speaking to his own father?" "Kieran," I said gently. "You don't have to apologize for anything. You're sick. You're scared. That's normal." "But nothing you've done is wrong," I said firmly. "You understand me, nothing." He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in his expression that made my throat tighten. Relief, maybe, or permission to stop carrying whatever weight he'd been holding. "Okay," he whispered. We sat in silence for a while. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. Outside the window, Atlanta traffic hummed 3 floors below. "Dad," Kieran said finally. "Yeah?" "Are you staying in Atlanta?" "As long as you need me here," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." His hand moved slightly on the blanket like he wanted to reach out but didn't know if he should. I stood up, preparing to let him rest. "I'll come back in a few hours. You get some sleep." As I turned toward the door, Kieran's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. Tight, quick, desperate. Then he released it just as fast, his eyes darting to the door again. When I stood to leave, Kieran grabbed my wrist tight quick, then released. As if he wanted to hold on but didn't dare. I looked down at my son, 15 years old, pale and thin in a hospital bed, checking doors before speaking, apologizing for things he hadn't done, grabbing his father's hand and then letting go like touch itself was dangerous. Someone had taught him that wanting his father was something to hide, and I was starting to understand who had taught him that lesson. I left Kieran's room with the feeling of that desperate grab and release still burning on my wrist. Someone had taught my son that wanting his father was dangerous, and I was about to learn just how many people she'd been teaching. Brennan sat in the third-floor waiting room at 4:30 that afternoon with his iPad and headphones, his back straight as a soldier's. When he saw me approach, he didn't smile or jump up or do any of the things a 13-year-old boy should do when his father walks into a room. He just sat there watching me with eyes that looked too old for his face. "Hey, Brennan," I said. He pulled off his headphones but stayed rigid in his chair. "Dad." Not Daddy. Not the warm greeting of a child. Just Dad, flat and emotionless, like he was addressing a stranger he'd been instructed to be polite to. I sat down in the chair across from him. "How are you holding up?" "Fine." He glanced at his iPad screen, then back at me. "Dad, do you know what papers you need to sign? Mom said you need to sign the whole set before the doctor lets you have the procedure." I stopped. "Sign the whole set before the doctor lets you have the procedure." That wasn't 13-year-old language. That was legal language. Specific, precise. The kind of phrasing someone teaches you word for word. "Who taught you that, Brennan?" I asked quietly. "Those exact words, sign the whole set before the doctor lets you have it." His eyes flicked down the hallway toward where Denise stood on her phone 50 feet away, checking, making sure she was watching. I figured it out," he said. My 13-year-old son was glancing at his mother to check if he was allowed to speak freely to his own father. That was the moment I understood how thoroughly she'd gotten inside his head. "Brennan," I said gently, "you don't have to worry about what Mom thinks when you talk to me. I'm your father. You can always tell me the truth." He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker across his face. Want, maybe. Or fear. Or both. "I know," he whispered. But he didn't say anything else. I stayed with him for 20 minutes asking about school, about his friends, about the video game on his iPad. He answered in short sentences, never relaxing, never letting his guard down. Every few minutes, his eyes would drift toward his mother down the hallway, monitoring. When I finally stood to leave, I put my hand on his shoulder. "I love you, buddy," I said. "Love you too," he said automatically. But there was no warmth in it. Just the recitation of words he'd been taught to say at the right moment. I walked away feeling like I'd just visited a prisoner who couldn't speak freely because the guards were always listening. At 8 p.m., I sat in my Hampton Inn room 3 blocks from the hospital staring at my laptop screen. Every Monday evening, I opened my bank email to check our account balances, a disciplined habit from years of careful saving. 11 years ago, I'd sold my old house in Dahlonega and put the money aside. When my mother passed 5 years back, her small inheritance went into the same account. Slow accumulation, careful planning, money set aside for the boys' college education for emergencies for the future. The transaction notification was dated December 12th, 2025. $240,000 transferred from joint savings account ending in 4782 to account ending in 9156. I read it 3 times. Then I logged into the bank website and checked the full transaction history. December 12th, 2025, 2:47 p.m. external transfer, $240,000. 11 years of savings, gone. I didn't recognize the receiving account number, didn't know who controlled it, didn't know where the money had gone. But I knew when. 3 weeks before the phone call that brought me to this hospital. How long does it take to steal $240,000 from your husband? Not the transaction itself, but the planning, the choosing of the date, the selecting of the account, the knowing you can do it without consequence. I called Thane. He answered on the second ring. I could hear the sound of his truck engine in the background. "Dad," he said, "I was just thinking about calling you." "You know about this money?" I asked. Silence on the other end. The truck engine hummed. "What money?" he said finally. $240,000. Gone from our savings. December 12th. More silence. Then, "I don't know about the money, but I know Mom's been preparing something. For a long time, Dad." "How long?" 12 years. 12 years. Thane was 30 now. 12 years ago, he would have been 18. A senior in high school, still living at home. "What did you see?" I asked. I heard him pull his truck over. The engine cut off. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped to barely above a whisper, the sound of a man who'd been sitting alone with something too heavy for too long. "I was going to tell you at the hospital," he said, "but then everything happened with Kieran, and I thought you needed to get through the test first. But Dad, if she's taking money, if she's doing what I think she's doing..." "Thane, what did you see 12 years ago?" He took a breath. "It was March 2013. I was home on spring break from my last semester. I woke up around 2 in the morning because I heard the front door close. I went to the window and saw a man walking to a car parked down the street, navy shirt, brown shoes, expensive-looking shiny. I'd never seen him before." The room felt suddenly cold. "Did you ask your mother about it?" "The next morning I asked her who was at the house last night. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, 'No one was here. You were dreaming. And Thane, don't mention this to your father. It would only upset him over nothing.'" March 2013. Brennan was born March 3rd, 2013. Dad, Thane said, his voice breaking slightly. I've kept this for 12 years. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. Tell me everything, I said. March 2013. Thane said into the phone, his voice steady now that he'd committed to telling the truth he'd carried for 12 years. He was 18, home from his first year of community college for spring break, and he got up at 2 a.m. to get a glass of water from the kitchen. I was walking down the hallway when I heard our kitchen door close, he said. Not slammed. Soft. Like someone trying not to wake anyone up. I sat on the edge of my hotel bed, gripping the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. I looked out the window, Thane continued, and I saw a man walking down our driveway, tall, short dark hair. He was wearing a navy blue shirt and these shiny brown Oxford shoes, dress shoes, sales shoes. Not the kind of shoes you wear at 2 a.m. unless you came from somewhere professional. Did you see his face? Not clearly, just his back. He walked to a car parked 2 houses down, got in and drove away. March 2013. Kieran was 3 years old. Brennan was a newborn. We'd just brought him home from the hospital. We'd moved into the Cumming house that spring. New neighborhood, new beginning. Or so I'd thought. What did your mother say when you asked her? I asked. Thane took a breath. The next morning at breakfast, I asked her who the man was, who came to the house last night. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, you saw wrong. No one came into the house. Never mention this to Dad or anyone else. No one will believe you. My eldest son had been carrying this memory alone since he was 18 years old, seeing a stranger leave his family's house in the middle of the night and being told by his own mother that speaking the truth would make him a liar. I was 18, Dad, Thane said quietly. I believed her. Or at least I believed that telling you would just cause problems. She made it sound like I was confused, like I'd seen a neighbor or something. But I knew what I saw. Why are you telling me now? Because of the money? Because of Kieran? Because... His voice cracked slightly. Because I'm 30 years old, and I've been watching you drive that bus route every morning for 9 years, and I realized if I didn't tell you now, I'd carry it for the rest of my life. And you deserve to know the truth. I sat there in that hotel room staring at the wall, trying to piece together what my life had actually been while I'd been living a different version of it. Thank you, I said finally, for telling me. I'm sorry it took 12 years. You were protecting yourself. That's not wrong. We stayed on the phone a few more minutes. When we hung up, I didn't sleep. At 10 a.m. on January 6th, I walked into conference room 4A on the hospital's 4th floor. Dr. Farrah Sinclair and Gail Whitaker sat at the table with a file already open in front of them. Their faces were prepared for a difficult conversation. I sat down. Thank you for coming, Mr. Caldwell, Dr. Farrah said. You have the results, I said, not a question. Preliminary results, she corrected gently. The preliminary HLA typing results show significant discrepancies in genetic markers between you and Kieran. We need confirmatory testing within the next 48 hours, but I want you to prepare yourself for the possibility that you are not Kieran's biological father. The words hung in the air like smoke. Significant discrepancies. Not Kieran's biological father. I'd known this was coming. From the moment I saw that word on Dr. Farrah's screen 3 days ago, discordance I'd known. But hearing it spoken aloud was different. I was in the delivery room, I said quietly. June 14th, 2010. I cut the umbilical cord. I held him while they cleaned him up. I've been his father for 15 years. Dr. Farrah's expression softened. We know. And we know that's not what this number on a page can measure, but we need you to understand what the test is telling us. I understand, I said. Gail leaned forward. The confirmatory test will take 48 hours. We'll have definitive results by January 8th. In the meantime, the transplant planning continues. Regardless of biological relation, you can still be a donor if you choose to proceed. What does it mean to cut an umbilical cord to hold a newborn covered in birth fluid and vernix to count 10 fingers and 10 toes if a test 48 hours from now says none of that made you a father? I'll proceed, I said. Dr. Farrah nodded. We'll schedule the confirmatory draw this afternoon. Do you have any questions? I had 1,000 questions, but none of them were medical. No, I said. I stood up. Gail stood too, her hand reaching out like she wanted to offer comfort but didn't know how. Mr. Caldwell, she said, take care of yourself. This is a lot to process. Thank you. I walked out of conference room 4A and stood in that hospital corridor. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A nurse pushed a cart past me. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped. 48 hours. 2 days before, I'd know for certain whether the last 15 years of being Kieran's father counted for anything in the eyes of science. But I already knew one thing Dr. Farrah's test couldn't measure. June 14th, 2010. The delivery room at Northside Hospital. Denise exhausted and pale. The doctor handing me surgical scissors and saying, Dad, you want to do the honors. Me cutting that cord with hands that trembled. Kieran's first cry. The weight of him in my arms, 7 pounds, 3 ounces. Every morning for 15 years, opening that bus door and seeing him climb aboard. Every parent-teacher conference, every clarinet recital, every Sunday morning breakfast where he asked for extra syrup. Those 15 years weren't a lie no matter what the DNA said. They were real. I walked down that hallway not knowing where I was going. I only knew that 48 hours from now, science would tell me I wasn't Kieran's biological father. But it couldn't tell me I wasn't his dad. I walked out of that conference room not knowing where I was going, but Thane knew. He called me 20 minutes later and told me to meet him in the parking lot. He had something to show me. Thane's red Ford F-15. Oh, smelled like stale coffee and old smoke when I climbed into the passenger seat that afternoon. His laptop was already open on the dashboard, a stack of printed bank documents between us, the kind of evidence you gather when you're about to follow a money trail that leads somewhere your family doesn't want you to go. I've been working on this since you told me about the money, he said. Pulled the full transaction history from your bank portal this morning. He clicked through screens until he found what he wanted. December 12th, 2025. The transfer I'd seen on my hotel room laptop. $240,000, Thane said. Transferred to an account registered under the name Vitality Circle LLC, Delaware registration, but the operating address is here and coming. He pulled up a new window. Google search results for Vitality Circle LLC. The first hit was an Instagram account with a pink and gold logo. Motivational quotes. Lifestyle photos. A woman with honey blonde highlights and designer sunglasses holding an expensive latte. Wellness coaching MLM, Thane said. Run by someone named Roxanne Bentley. Look at her posts. I scrolled through the Instagram feed. Photos of Roxanne in yoga pants and luxury athleisure, captions like, invest in yourself, queen, and financial freedom starts with mindset. Screenshots of Venmo transactions with dollar signs, the usual pyramid scheme aesthetic. Then I saw the photos with Denise, 6 of them over the past 2 years. Roxanne and my wife at brunch spots, at wine bars, at some kind of wellness retreat with matching robes, both women smiling like old friends. I sat in that truck looking at those photos, my wife and this woman with her designer bags and motivational quotes smiling at restaurants I'd never been to, while somewhere in the background my money was being transferred into accounts I'd never heard of. They're not strangers, I said quietly. No, Thane agreed. They're friends, or they want people to think they're friends. He clicked to a new tab. LinkedIn profile Roxanne Bentley. Certified wellness coach, founder Vitality Circle LLC, before that marketing coordinator at some vitamin supplement company. Before that sales associate at a boutique fitness studio. Nothing impressive, nothing that explained where she'd get the connections to help someone steal $250,000. Then Thane scrolled down to the people also viewed section. Look at this, he said, pointing to a name. Julia Bentley, Roxanne's sister. He clicked through. Julia Bentley, Director of Strategic Partnerships, Stryker Medical Devices, Georgia Region. Stryker Medical Devices. I stared at that name. You see it, right? Thane asked. How many people does it take to steal a man's entire savings and destroy his family 1, 2, 3, 4, and how long do they have to plan it for every piece to fall into place so perfectly? Keep going, I said. Thane opened a new search window. He typed slowly, deliberately, Bryce Mercer, Stryker Medical. The first result was a LinkedIn profile. Bryce Mercer, Regional Sales Manager, Stryker Medical Devices, Georgia Region. Thane clicked it. The profile photo loaded. 50 years old, graying temples, slight smile, confident posture, professional headshot taken in what looked like an office with Atlanta skyline visible through the window behind him. And he was wearing a navy blue shirt, the exact shade Thane had described from that night in 2013. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not surprise, not shock, just the heavy weight of confirmation. That's him, Thane said quietly. That's the man I saw leaving our house at 2 a.m. I read through Bryce Mercer's profile. 23 years at Stryker Medical Devices. Started as a sales rep, worked his way up to regional manager. Managed accounts across Georgia, Tennessee, and North Carolina. Specialized in orthopedic implants and surgical equipment. Member of the Atlanta Medical Sales Association. Volunteer coach for youth soccer in Alpharetta. A normal, successful career. A respectable life. And somewhere in the middle of all that normalcy, he'd been walking out of my house at 2 a.m. while my 3-year-old son and my newborn baby slept upstairs. Dad, Thane said, look at his connections. I scrolled down. The profile showed mutual connections. Julia Bentley, Roxanne Bentley, and 3 other Stryker employees I didn't recognize. Not Denise, she didn't have a LinkedIn profile. But the network was there, clear as day. Bryce at Stryker, Julia at Stryker in Strategic Partnerships, Roxanne running a fake wellness LLC, Denise funneling money through that LLC, all of them connected, all of them photographed together at various events if you dug deep enough into social media. This wasn't an impulsive affair. This was calculated, coordinated, years in the making. How long do you think they've known each other? Thane asked. I looked at Bryce Mercer's employment history. 23 years at Stryker. Julia Bentley joined the company 8 years ago. Roxanne started Vitality Circle LLC 3 years ago. Long enough to plan this, I said. Thane turned the laptop toward me so I could see the profile more clearly. Bryce Mercer, 50 years old, regional sales manager, professional headshot, graying temples, slight smile, navy blue shirt. I thought about March 2013, the month Brennan was born, the month we moved into the Cumming house. The month my 18-year-old son saw a stranger leaving our home and was told by his mother never to speak of it. I thought about the shiny brown Oxford shoes Thane had described. Sales shoes, professional shoes, the kind of shoes a man wears when he's coming from work, or going to work, or maintaining the appearance of legitimacy while doing something that would destroy a family if anyone knew. Stryker Medical Devices, I said aloud. I typed that name with Bryce Mercer into the search bar. The first result showed a company photo from some kind of regional sales conference. 20 people in business casual standing in rows like a high school yearbook photo. Bryce Mercer in the back row, navy blue shirt, graying temples, smiling at the camera like he had every right to be there. Like he had every right to walk into my life and take everything I'd built. I stared at that photo of Bryce Mercer for a long time. Then I closed the laptop and told Thane I needed to get back to the hospital. There were questions I had to ask, and I wasn't going to wait 48 hours for DNA results to start asking them. Denise caught me in the hallway outside Kieran's room at 3:30 that afternoon with red eyes and trembling hands, looking every bit like a terrified mother whose child was dying. And I stood there knowing exactly what I'd discovered about Bryce Mercer and Roxanne Bentley and the money watching her perform an emotion she didn't actually feel. "Honey," she said, her voice breaking on the word. "I know I'm not the perfect wife, but this is the most difficult time for our family. I need you to stand with me." She reached out like she needed support, like she was about to collapse, like the weight of Kieran's illness was too much to bear alone. I didn't move to catch her. "What do you want, Denise?" I asked. "Specifically right now, what do you want from me?" She blinked, and for half a second the trembling stopped. Just half a second. Then it resumed perfectly calibrated. "I want you." She paused like the words were hard to get out. "I want you not to ask the hospital any more questions. Leave everything to me. You just need to donate." There it was. Stop asking questions. Let her manage everything. Just donate and stay quiet. I've been married to this woman for 18 years, long enough to know the difference between real tears and performance tears, between genuine fear and calculated manipulation, between a wife who needs support and a wife who needs compliance. "I'll think about it," I said. I turned and walked toward the elevator. Behind me, I heard her exhale. Not the sigh of someone in pain. The sigh of someone recalculating a strategy that didn't work. The next morning, Wayne Frost met me in a small meeting room on the 3rd floor. He'd arranged for someone to come talk to me, someone who'd been watching my sons for months. Simone Garrett walked in at 9 a.m. sharp. She was 38, a school counselor from Forsyth Central High School, carrying only a pen and notebook, no tablet, no laptop. Her face was serious with the professional gravity of someone who'd documented concerning patterns and needed to report them. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, sitting down across from me. "Wayne asked me to share some observations I've made about Kieran and Brennan over the past 3 months." She opened her notebook. The pages were filled with dated entries in neat handwriting. "Kieran has been coming to my office since October," she said, "initially for college planning discussions. But he started asking questions that concerned me." "What kind of questions?" I asked. She read from her notes. "If someone knows something is wrong, but saying it will hurt someone else, should they say it?" That was November 4th. November 18th. "Can you get in trouble for not telling the truth if no one asks you directly?" December 2nd. "What happens to younger siblings when families break apart?" She looked up at me. "I think Kieran is carrying a very heavy burden." My throat tightened. "What else?" I asked. Simone flipped a page. "Behavioral patterns. When I ask Kieran about home life, he swallows words mid-sentence, literally stops himself from finishing thoughts, and he glances toward the door before answering like he's checking who's listening. That behavior has escalated since October. October, 3 months before the hospital, 3 months before any of this became a crisis." "And Brennan?" I asked. Simone's expression shifted. "Brennan uses language that concerns me greatly. Phrases like, 'My father has inappropriate behavior. My father creates a stressful environment. Boundaries are being violated.' These are precise clinical phrases." She tapped her pen on the notebook. "That's adult language that's been repeated many times until it becomes automatic," she said. "A 13-year-old wouldn't spontaneously come up with inappropriate behavior or stressful environment or boundaries being violated. Those are therapeutic terms, legal terms. Someone taught him to say those exact words. What does it do to a 15-year-old boy to carry knowledge that would destroy his younger brother's world to know the truth, but be forced to swallow it mid-sentence, to glance at doors, checking who's listening before he can speak to his own father?" "When did this start?" I asked. Simone checked her notes. "First documented instance was October 9th. Brennan came to my office after a classroom discussion about family dynamics. He repeated those phrases almost word for word when I asked about his home life. Since then, the language has become more consistent, more rehearsed." October 9th, almost 3 months of coaching before Kieran got sick. "Mrs. Caldwell volunteers extensively at the school," Simone continued carefully. "She's been very involved in both boys' education, very present, very attentive." The way she said attentive made it clear she meant something else. "Simone," I said, "what do you think is happening?" She closed her notebook and looked directly at me with the clear-eyed assessment of someone who'd spent months watching my sons navigate a minefield I couldn't see. "I think someone has been systematically coaching Brennan to use specific language about you," she said. "And I think Kieran knows why. I think he's been watching it happen and trying to protect his younger brother from understanding the full truth of what's being done to their family." "Do you know who Kieran is protecting?" I asked. She paused. "I think he's protecting his younger brother," she said quietly, "from knowing something that would break his heart." I sat there in that small meeting room, fluorescent lights humming overhead while Simone Garrett's words settled over me like cold water. Kieran knew. My 15-year-old son had been carrying the weight of our family's lies for months, watching his mother coach his younger brother, seeing the manipulation, understanding what it meant. And he'd been trying to shield Brennan from the truth that was about to destroy everything. The same truth I'd been running from for 48 hours. The truth that in approximately 24 hours a DNA test would confirm beyond any doubt Kieran was protecting his younger brother from knowing something that would break his heart. And I had about 24 hours left before that same truth broke mine in black and white on a medical report. I recognized Roxanne Bentley the moment she walked into the Scottish Rite lobby that Tuesday afternoon, not from meeting her before, but from the 6 Instagram photos Thane had pulled up yesterday, showing her laughing with my wife over expensive brunches while my savings disappeared. She wore a camel cashmere coat and carried a Tory Burch bag, her honey blonde highlights perfect. She looked like someone visiting a friend, not a children's hospital full of dying patients. Denise was already there waiting by the elevators. When Roxanne approached, they greeted each other with the relaxed familiarity of old friends, laughing, touching each other's arms. The comfortable body language of 2 women who'd shared many brunches and many secrets. I walked directly toward them. Roxanne saw me first. Her smile brightened professionally. "You must be Denise's husband," she said warmly. "You're so brave to come donate like this." There's something surreal about recognizing someone in real life that you've only seen through the filter of Instagram photos and financial fraud investigations, like watching a character step out of a photograph and become 3-dimensional breathing guilty. "And you're Roxanne Bentley," I said. "From Vitality Circle LLC. Her smile held, but something flickered in her eyes. "And I know your sister is Director of Strategic Partnerships at Stryker Medical Devices," I added. The smile froze. She blinked, processing how I knew this. Denise's hand shot out and gripped Roxanne's arm. A warning, clear and immediate. Roxanne recovered quickly. "Oh, it's just work. Everyone has to make a living." I nodded once and walked away without another word. I'd seen what I needed to see. The digital conspiracy had flesh and blood, and they knew I was investigating them. The next morning, Thane met me in his truck in the hospital parking lot at 8 a.m. His laptop was already open. "I need to show you something," he said. He pulled up 2 images side by side. The first was Bryce Mercer's LinkedIn profile. Navy blue shirt, graying temples, professional smile. The second was a photo from Denise's email account, the Google family sharing account that still sent Thane copies of old photos automatically. It was taken at Forsyth Central High School, fall 2022, the annual open house where parents met their children's teachers. Denise stood in the hallway outside a classroom. Beside her was Bryce Mercer. His hand rested on her back, not the polite touch of acquaintances, the familiar touch of someone who belonged there. Behind them on a display table, I could see a Berkshire Hathaway Home Services brochure. "He was at my kid's school open house," I said quietly, "in 2022, meeting their teachers. And he was at the summer party in 2023, Thane said, scrolling to another photo. "I didn't go that day because I had an extra shift. You didn't go either, did you?" I stared at the second photo. A backyard party. Kieran's 13th birthday, I thought. Or maybe just an end-of-summer gathering. Bryce stood near a picnic table holding a drink, smiling at someone off camera. How many extra shifts did I drive? How many mornings did I wake up at 4:30 to run summer routes? How many evenings did I skip dinner to earn overtime so I could buy my sons things they needed while the man sleeping with my wife stood in their schoolyard pretending to be a family friend? "I didn't go," I said. "I worked a double shift that day, summer school routes. I was saving up to buy Kieran a laptop for the school year." Thane looked at me. "Dad, I remember that party," I continued. "Denise asked me if I could get off work. I told her I couldn't, we needed the money. She said it was fine, that she'd handle everything that Kieran would understand." I looked at Bryce Mercer standing in my backyard, in my son's school. At events I'd missed because I was driving a bus to earn money for a family, this man was destroying from the inside. "He wasn't hiding," I said. "Was he?" "No," Thane said quietly. "He was right there, in plain sight, at school events, at parties, probably at other things too. We just don't have photos of everything." I thought about all the times Denise had mentioned a friend from the gym, or a colleague helping with something, or a neighbor who offered to pitch in. How many of those vague references had been Bryce? How many times had I been grateful that Denise had friends willing to help while I worked overtime? "Look at the date on this open house photo," Thane said, pointing to the metadata. October 2022. October 2022. The same month Simone Garrett said Brennan's coaching started. The same time Kieran began asking his school counselor questions about keeping painful secrets. Bryce hadn't just been sleeping with my wife. He'd been integrated into my family's life, attending my children's school events, standing in my backyard, meeting my son's teachers. While I drove that yellow bus through Forsyth County, earning money to pay for the house where he was welcome, and the school events he attended, and the life he was stealing piece by piece. "There's one more thing," Thane said. He zoomed in on the open house photo. Behind Bryce and Denise, barely visible in the background, was Kieran. 15, no 13 then, standing against a locker watching his mother and this man. The expression on Kieran's face wasn't confusion. It was knowledge. My 13-year-old son had seen Bryce Mercer at his school open house in 2022 and known something was wrong. Had watched this stranger touch his mother's back with familiar ease, had carried that knowledge for over a year before the coaching started, before the hospital, before everything fell apart. And he'd said nothing, because what could a 13-year-old boy say when he sees something like that and doesn't have the words to name it? I sat in Thane's truck staring at that photo and felt every hour of that overtime shift come back in perfect detail. The empty bus at 5 a.m., the clipboard and route map, the exhaustion, the satisfaction of knowing I'd earned enough to buy Kieran the laptop he needed for school. And while I drove that bus, Bryce Mercer stood in my son's schoolyard with his hand on my wife's shoulder, smiling like he belonged there. I remember that 2023 party. I worked overtime to buy Kieran a laptop. I couldn't go. That man stood in my son's schoolyard. The 48 hours ended at exactly 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning, when Dr. Farrah Sinclair walked into conference room 4A, carrying a manila folder with my name typed across the tab. The 2023 party replayed in my head all night, Bryce's hand on Denise's back, standing in the schoolyard while I worked overtime to afford Kieran's laptop. I'd sat in this same conference room since 8:30, watching the fourth-floor hallway through the narrow window in the door. Wayne had arrived at 9 with coffee I hadn't touched. Thane and Marrow came 15 minutes later, taking positions against the far wall without saying a word. Dr. Sinclair was a woman in her early 40s with silver-rimmed glasses and dark hair pulled into a tight bun. The white coat she wore had Scottish Rite Hospital embroidered on the pocket in navy thread. She set the folder on the table between Wayne and me, then pulled out the chair across from mine with a soft scrape. "Mr. Vernon," she said. Her voice was professional, measured. "I have your confirmatory results." Wayne shifted in his seat. I heard the fabric of his suit jacket rustle. I didn't reach for the folder. My hand stayed flat on the laminate surface, fingers spread. The preliminary tests we discussed on Monday indicated significant discrepancies in multiple genetic markers, Dr. Sinclair continued. She opened the folder with precise movements and slid a single page toward me. The paper had the hospital letterhead at the top. "The confirmatory analysis using our expanded panel validates those initial findings." The page was covered in numbers and charts I didn't understand. Tables with abbreviations like D3S1358 and VWA filled the upper half. But halfway down, one line was underlined in red ink. Probability of paternity 0.000%. What do you call the moment when 15 years of fatherhood gets reduced to 3 zeros and a decimal point? This test evaluated 23 autosomal genetic markers using STR analysis, Dr. Sinclair said. Her voice remained steady, clinical, like she was reading from a script she'd delivered 100 times before. At every single marker tested, the alleles you carry are incompatible with Kieran's genetic profile. There is no biological relationship. The probability of paternity is effectively 0. I stared at the red underline. Someone had used a ruler to make it perfectly straight. "And Brennan?" I said. Dr. Sinclair looked up from the folder. "I'm sorry. My other son, Brennan, 13 years old." I looked directly at her. "I want him tested too." Dr. Sinclair glanced at Wayne, then back at me. "Mr. Vernon, I understand this is difficult, but..." "I'm not asking if it's difficult," I said. "I'm asking if you can test him." Wayne leaned forward. "We can arrange that. But we need consent from both legal guardians, and given Brennan's age..." "I'm his father," I said. The word felt sharp in my mouth like glass. "Until someone proves otherwise with another piece of paper and another red line, I'm his father. Get the test." Dr. Sinclair nodded slowly. "I'll have the lab prepare a buccal swab collection kit. Standard protocol is 48 hours for confirmatory paternity analysis." "Do it faster," I said. "We can request priority processing," she replied. 24 hours. Wayne pulled out his phone and started typing. I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the floor tiles. "Where's Denise?" I asked. Wayne stopped typing. He didn't look up. "She's in the waiting area, 4th floor near the elevators." "Tell her to come here." Wayne set his phone down. "Vernon, maybe you should take some time to..." "Tell her to come here," I repeated. Wayne held my gaze for 3 seconds, then stood and walked to the door. He stepped into the hallway and I heard his voice muffled through the wall saying something I couldn't make out. 30 seconds later, the door opened again. Denise walked in wearing the same gray sweater she'd worn on Monday. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her face was dry. No tears this time. She looked at me first, then at the folder on the table, then back at me. "Sit down," I said. She pulled out the chair beside Dr. Sinclair and sat with her hands folded in her lap. I slid the DNA report across the table. The paper made a soft scraping sound against the wood surface. Denise looked down at it. Her eyes moved across the page, slowly, methodically stopping at the red underline. Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. 0%, I said. "That's what it says. Probability of paternity 0.000. She didn't respond. 15 years, I said. My voice came out quieter than I'd intended, but every word was controlled. I changed his diapers. I taught him to ride a bike without training wheels in the driveway. I sat in the emergency room for 4 hours when he broke his wrist in 3rd grade, and I held his hand while they set the cast. Denise's hands remained folded in her lap. She didn't look up. "And the whole time you knew," I said. She was silent. "I need to know who," I said. "I need a name." 5 seconds passed. Then she said, "Bryce Mercer." The air left the room. Not metaphorically, I genuinely couldn't breathe for 3 seconds. "Bryce Mercer," I repeated. The man Roxanne said was on the board at Stryker Medical Devices. The man in the photo from the 2022 open house with his hand on your back. The man who stood in Kieran's schoolyard at the 2023 summer party. Denise nodded once. How long? I asked. It started in 2010, she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Before Kieran was born. And it never stopped. She shook her head. Wayne leaned forward, his elbows on the table. Mrs. Denise, I need to clarify something for the legal record. Does Mr. Mercer know that Kieran is his biological son? Denise's hands tightened in her lap. Her knuckles went white. Does Bryce know about Kieran? I asked. Silence for 3 seconds. He knows, Denise said. I stood. The chair scraped against the floor. Call him here, I said. Denise looked up at me. Vernon? Call him, I said. Right now. Tell him to come to this hospital. Tell him I want to see him face to face. Wayne stood as well. Vernon, we need to think strategically about... I've been thinking for 48 hours, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I've been thinking while Kieran was unconscious in a hospital bed. I've been thinking while my wife sat across from me and lied every single time she opened her mouth. I'm done thinking. I turned back to Denise. Call him here. Denise never made the call. She left the conference room without a word, and by the time I reached the hallway, she'd vanished. Wayne closed the office door behind me with a click that sounded like a cell door sealing, and when he turned around, his face told me the cancer wasn't my only death sentence. This was January 8th, late afternoon. I'd driven to Wayne's private practice in Buckhead for what he'd called a follow-up consultation. His assistant had left for the day. We were alone. Sit down, Vernon, Wayne said. I sat in the leather chair across from his desk. He stood by the window with his arms crossed. I reviewed your patient portal access logs, he said. My what? Your patient portal, the online system for test results, appointments, billing. He opened a folder. When did you last log in? Maybe 6 months ago. I don't use it much. You don't use it at all, Wayne said, because on August 15th, 2025, someone changed the email address associated with your account. He slid a printed page across the desk. Patient portal account activity log. Highlighted in yellow, email changed from vcaldwell@dekalbschools.gov to denise.caldwell.home@gmail.com. That's not my email, I said. I know, Wayne said. It's Denise's. I stared at the date. August 15th, 5 months ago. I didn't authorize that. No, but someone with your login credentials did. Once that email was changed, every notification went to Denise instead of you. He pulled out another page. Appointment history. September 18th. I ordered follow-up imaging after your August physical flagged elevated liver enzymes, scheduled for September 20th at 10 a.m., canceled September 18th at 2 p.m. Another page. October 3rd, I referred you to a hepatology specialist, scheduled for October 10th, canceled October 3rd at 4 p.m. Another page. November 12th, I ordered a liver biopsy consultation, scheduled for November 18th, canceled November 12th at 11 a.m. He set all 3 pages in front of me, all canceled within hours of being scheduled, all through the patient portal, all notifications sent to denise.caldwell.home@gmail.com. The office smelled like the lemon cleaner they used in the morgue at the funeral home where we'd buried my father. I wondered if Wayne noticed. I wondered if he'd chosen it deliberately. If those appointments hadn't been canceled. I said, how much earlier would you have diagnosed the cancer? Wayne sat down and removed his glasses. 4 months, possibly 5. The September imaging would have shown the lesion when it was significantly smaller. We could have done a resection instead of emergency debulking surgery. The prognosis would have been substantially better. I looked at the pages again. September 18th, October 3rd, November 12th. 3 appointments, 3 cancellations, 3 chances. She knew, I said. Wayne nodded. She changed the email so I wouldn't see the results. She canceled every appointment so I wouldn't get treatment. I looked up at him. She was waiting for me to get sick enough that it would kill me. I can't speak to intent, Wayne said, but the evidence suggests systematic interference with your medical care beginning in mid-August 2025. I stood. The chair rolled backward and hit the wall. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the motel room Thane had paid for and thought about August 15th. 3 weeks before Kieran started high school. 2 weeks before Denise asked me to add her name to the Marietta house deed. 1 week before she wanted to update our wills. I'd thought she was being practical. January 9th, 7:15 in the morning. I drove back to Scottish Rite because Marrow texted that Kieran's vitals were stable and they were reducing sedation. I took the stairs to the 3rd floor. When I reached the hallway outside Kieran's room, I heard voices. I stopped. One voice was Denise's, the other was Brennan's. I hadn't seen Brennan since the conference room 5 days ago. Denise had kept him away, claimed he was staying with her sister in Decatur. But here he was, and I could hear him talking. I walked closer and looked through the narrow window. Denise stood beside Kieran's bed, holding her phone at chest height, angled toward Brennan. Brennan faced her with his back to the door. A nurse in blue scrubs stood near the monitors, checking IV lines. Her name tag said Olivia Raines. She was in her mid-40s with short brown hair and tired eyes. Denise's voice came through the door loud and clear. "You're sure you don't want to see your father?" she asked. Brennan hesitated for a second. Then he said, "He's not my father anymore." "Why not, sweetheart?" Denise's voice was syrupy concerned. "Because he said horrible things about Mom," Brennan said. The words came out flat, rehearsed. "I don't want to see him." Nurse Olivia looked uncomfortable. She stepped back from the monitors and glanced at Denise. My hand found the door frame. The metal was cold, institutional. I counted the rivets, 7, visible from where I stood, because if I didn't count something, I was going to put my fist through the window and drag my 13-year-old son out by his collar. I pushed the door open. Denise's head snapped up. Her phone dropped and she slid it into her pocket in one smooth motion. Her face rearranged itself into surprise. "Vernon," she said, "I didn't know you were—" Brennan turned. When he saw me, his face didn't show defiance. It showed fear. Genuine, unfiltered fear. Not the performance he'd just given Denise. Real terror. Nurse Olivia took another step back. "Good morning," I said. My voice was calm, controlled. "I came to check on Kieran." Denise stepped between me and Brennan. "Nurse Olivia," she said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade wrapped in honey. "Would you mind documenting that my son is afraid to be alone with his father?" Her eyes locked on mine, and I saw it the same cold calculation I'd seen in Thane's face 30 years ago when he'd told our mother he was taking the Marietta house. She wasn't just taking my money, she was taking my son's, and she'd been planning it since August. Nurse Olivia didn't document anything. She glanced at Denise, then at me, then walked out of the room without saying a word. Brennan stayed silent in the corner, staring at the floor. The man stepping off the elevator wore a gray jacket, navy scarf, and brown polished Oxford shoes I'd last seen walking out my front door at 2 a.m. 12 years ago. This was noon on January 9th. The third-floor hallway at Scottish Rite. Bryce Mercer walked toward me with his hand extended like we were meeting at a country club. "I'm Bryce," he said. "Difficult situation for everyone." "Look at your feet," I said. He stopped mid-step. His hand dropped. He looked down at his shoes. Brown leather Oxfords with wingtip detailing, polished to a mirror shine. Expensive. 3 seconds passed. Long enough for recognition to register on his face. 12 years ago, I said, "You left my house at 2 a.m. wearing those." Bryce's jaw tightened. He didn't deny it. "March 2013, I continued. "I was on the night shift. My brother saw you. Navy shirt, khaki slacks, brown Oxford shoes. Thane didn't know who you were then, but I know now." Bryce glanced past me toward Kieran's room. "Can we talk privately?" "No," I said. "Here, what are you doing in my son's hospital?" "Denise called me," he said. "She said there was a situation with Kieran that required—" "Denise called you because Kieran needs a transplant and you're his biological father," I said. The words came out flat, factual. "That's why you're here." Bryce shifted his weight. The polished Oxford squeaked slightly on the linoleum. Denise appeared from around the corner, moving fast. "Vernon, please not here," she started. "Stay away," I said without looking at her. She stopped 10 feet back. I turned back to Bryce. "Why are you in my son's hospital?" "I came because Denise said it was urgent," Bryce said. His voice was controlled corporate, the kind of tone you use in board meetings. "I wasn't aware of the full situation until this morning." "You've known about Kieran for 15 years, I said. Bryce didn't respond. Denise tried to position herself between us. I sidestepped, kept my eyes on Bryce's face, watching for tells, watching for guilt or calculation or anything human. His face showed nothing. "Gail wants to talk to all of us," Denise said. "She's waiting in counseling room 3B. Gail Whitaker stood when we entered. The counseling room was small, institutional. 4 chairs arranged around a low table, a box of tissues on the corner. Gail held a manila folder identical to the one Dr. Sinclair had carried 2 days ago. The room smelled like artificial vanilla, some plug-in air freshener meant to calm families before they heard terrible news. It made my stomach turn. "Mr. Mercer," Gail said, "thank you for coming on short notice." Bryce nodded. He sat in the chair farthest from me. "I'll be direct," Gail said. She opened the folder. "Kieran's liver function has deteriorated significantly in the past 72 hours. Without a transplant within 2 weeks, his survival probability is approximately 40%. I felt the air leave my chest. "We have him on the UNOS transplant list," Gail continued. "But given his age, blood type, and current condition, the wait time for a cadaveric donor could be 3 to 6 months. He doesn't have that long." Bryce listened like he was reviewing a contract. Attentive, detached. "Living donor transplantation is the optimal solution," Gail said. "We need to test potential donors for compatibility. Mr. Mercer, as Kieran's biological father, you're the first candidate we'd like to evaluate." Bryce looked at the folder, then at Gail. "What does the testing involve?" he asked. "Blood work, imaging, full medical history review," Gail said. "We can begin today. The lab is on the 2nd floor." Bryce was quiet for 5 seconds. "I need to consult my lawyer before agreeing to any medical procedures," he said. I stared at him. "Your son is dying," I said, "and you want to call a lawyer." "I have a right to legal advice before making decisions about medical procedures," Bryce said. His tone didn't change. Corporate, measured. "I'm sure you understand." "No," I said. "I don't understand. My son Kieran is upstairs with a failing liver and you're talking about legal rights." "Mr. Caldwell," Bryce said, "I appreciate the urgency, but I'm not making medical decisions without proper counsel." Gail closed the folder. "Mr. Mercer, time is a critical factor. Every day we delay testing is a day Kieran's condition worsens." "I understand," Bryce said. "I'll respond through my attorney as quickly as possible." He stood. A man appeared in his doorway. Mid-50s gray suit, silver cufflinks that caught the fluorescent light. He didn't introduce himself. He leaned close to Bryce and whispered something I couldn't hear. Bryce's expression shifted. The uncertainty I'd seen for half a second disappeared. His face became resolved, legally protected. He turned to Gail. "I'll be in touch through counsel," he said. Then he walked out. The man in the gray suit followed. I'd driven a bus for 33 years, never had an accident, never missed a shift, never asked for anything, and now I was begging a man in $200 shoes to save my son's life while he called a lawyer. Gail sat down heavily in her chair. "Who was that?" I asked. "The man who just whispered to Bryce." "I don't know," Gail said. "I've never seen him before." Denise stood by the door silent. "You know who he is?" I said to her. She didn't answer. I walked out of the counseling room and took the stairs to the 3rd floor. My legs moved on autopilot, left foot, right foot, hand on the railing. When I reached Kieran's hallway, I stopped outside his room and looked through the glass. He was asleep. The ventilator tube was gone. They'd extubated him that morning. His chest rose and fell on its own. 15 years old. Brown hair like Bryce's. Narrow face like Denise's. Not my son by blood, but mine in every way that mattered. I stood outside Kieran's room, watching him sleep through the glass. I was 57 years old. Wayne said 8% complication risk. I asked myself, he won't donate. What will you do? The answer came immediately, and it didn't require Bryce Mercer's permission. I found Gail in the 3rd floor nursing station and asked where Dr. Farrah Sinclair's office was. She gave me directions to the 2nd floor west wing. I knocked on Dr. Farrah Sinclair's door at 2 o'clock with a decision that didn't need permission from Bryce Mercer, Denise Caldwell, or anyone else breathing. Dr. Sinclair looked up from her desk. The same silver-rimmed glasses, the same tight bun. She gestured to the chair across from her. "Mr. Caldwell," she said. "I heard about the situation with Mr. Mercer." "I want to donate," I said. "I know he's not mine biologically. Can I still do it?" She didn't ask why Bryce wouldn't donate. Didn't ask if I understood the implications. She just nodded and pulled up a file on her computer. "Let me show you the HLA typing results," she said. She turned the monitor toward me, a table filled with numbers and abbreviations I didn't fully understand. But one line was highlighted, HLA match 6 out of 10. 6 out of 10 markers match, Dr. Sinclair said. A perfect match is 10 out of 10, typically only seen in identical twins. 6 out of 10 is solid compatibility for living donor transplantation. I stared at the screen. "So I can save him," I said. "Even though Bryce..." "Biology isn't destiny," Dr. Sinclair said. HLA compatibility doesn't require biological paternity. What matters is tissue typing, not who contributed DNA 15 years ago. Something loosened in my chest. Not relief exactly, more like a door unlocking. "What are the risks?" I asked. Dr. Sinclair pulled out a printed document and set it on the desk between us. "For a 57-year-old donor, the risks are higher than for younger candidates," she said. "Serious complications occur in approximately 8% of cases in your age group." "What kind of complications?" "Infection, bleeding requiring transfusion, temporary kidney dysfunction, injury to surrounding organs during the procedure," she said. She didn't soften it. I appreciated that. "In rare cases, nerve damage affecting mobility. Recovery time is typically 6 to 8 weeks. 8%. I thought about the bus routes I'd driven. Thought about the thousands of mornings I'd checked tire pressure, brake lines, emergency exits. 8% felt like manageable risk. "What happens to Kieran without a donor?" I asked. Dr. Sinclair's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. "He's on the UNOS transplant list," she said. "But given his blood type, age, and current decline rate, we're looking at a 3 to 6 month wait for a cadaveric donor. His liver function suggests he has less time than that." "How much less?" "Without intervention, survival probability drops below 15% within 6 months, she said. "With a compatible living donor, we can perform the transplant within 2 weeks. 5-year survival rate with a 6 out of 10 match is approximately 61%. 61% versus 15. What kind of father looks at those numbers and says he needs time to think? "And if the donor is me," I said, "with the cancer diagnosis Wayne gave me in January, does that disqualify me?" Dr. Sinclair looked at the file on her screen. "Your January scans showed stage 2, a hepatocellular carcinoma," she said. "Localized single lesion post-debulking. You're not currently on active chemotherapy. The donated portion of your liver would be from the healthy segments. So I'm eligible." "Medically, yes," she said. "But Mr. Caldwell, you need to understand that donating a liver lobe while managing your own cancer significantly complicates your treatment timeline. Your oncologist would need to delay any planned interventions for at least 8 weeks while you recover from the donation surgery." "I understand," I said. She studied me for 3 seconds. "Your cancer prognosis is uncertain," she said. "Donating doesn't guarantee Kieran's survival, and it puts your own health at additional risk." "I understand," I said again. Dr. Sinclair pulled a form from her desk drawer. "Consent for living donor liver transplantation." The header was printed in bold at the top. "This document outlines the risks, benefits, and alternatives," she said. "You're not obligated to donate. Even if you sign today, you can withdraw consent at any time before the surgery." She slid the form across the desk toward me. 3 pages, single-spaced medical terminology in every paragraph. I read through it. Risks, complications, recovery timeline, legal acknowledgement that I understood donation was voluntary and irrevocable once performed. The language was clinical, impersonal, but underneath the medical jargon, the message was simple. I was choosing to give part of myself to save someone who didn't share my DNA. "Do you want time to consider?" Dr. Sinclair asked. "I can schedule a follow-up consultation tomorrow or—" "No," I said. "I've thought it through." She pushed a pen toward me. I thought my hand would shake when I picked up the pen, but it didn't. Steadiest my hand had been since Wayne told me the cancer diagnosis. I signed my name on the first page. Vernon Caldwell, 57 years old, school bus driver, cancer patient, father. Not by biology, not by law once the divorce went through, but by choice. I initialed the second page, acknowledged the risks, confirmed I understood the alternatives, agreed to pre-surgical screening and psychological evaluation. On the third page, I signed again. Final consent, irrevocable agreement. My signature looked the same as it always had. Neat block letters, slightly right-slanted. The signature of a man who'd driven school buses for 33 years, who'd never owned anything expensive, who'd worked overtime to buy his son a laptop. The signature of a 57-year-old bus driver with nothing but love and choice. Dr. Sinclair took the form and filed it in a manila folder. "I'll schedule the pre-surgical workup for tomorrow morning," she said. "Imaging labs cardiac clearance. If everything looks acceptable, we can perform the transplant within 7 to 10 days. "Thank you," I said. I stood. Dr. Sinclair stood as well. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, "what you're doing, it matters." I nodded and walked out. Somewhere in this hospital, Denise was building evidence against me. Bryce was calling lawyers. Boyd Lancaster was strategizing. But I had the one thing none of them could take. I could save my son. Dr. Sinclair scheduled my pre-surgical workup for the next morning. I left her office knowing I could save Kieran and that nobody could stop me. Thane had driven 3 hours to tell me in person what he wouldn't say over the phone, and the cafeteria fluorescent lights made his 30-year-old face look exactly like mine had at that age, tired, betrayed, trying to hold it together. This was 7 o'clock that evening, January 9th. The first-floor cafeteria was nearly empty. Visiting hours had ended. Thane sat at a corner table with Margot and Clover. The stroller was parked beside them, Clover asleep inside. I pulled out the chair across from Thane and sat. "You asked about 2013, Thane said. "I'll tell you everything." "You don't have to," I started. "Yes, I do," he said. Margot squeezed his hand. Thane looked down at his coffee cup. Hospital cafeteria coffee, bitter and institutional. "The morning after I saw the man leave at 2 a.m., he said. Denise called me into her room. I thought maybe she'd explain, maybe say it wasn't what it looked like." He paused. Instead, she said, "You don't need to call me so often. You're old enough now. You should focus on your own life." I stared at him. "I was 18, Thane continued. "I just graduated high school. I called her maybe twice a week, and suddenly she was telling me I was calling too much." "She pushed you away," I said. "Not all at once," Thane said. "It was gradual. She stopped answering when I called, stopped inviting me to family dinners. When I showed up anyway, she'd act distracted, like I was interrupting something important." He looked up at me. "I was 18 years old, and my mother pushed me out because I saw what I shouldn't have seen." "That's not your fault," I said. "I know," Thane said. "But I carried it anyway. For 13 years, I thought maybe I'd done something wrong. Maybe I should have told you right away instead of waiting. Maybe if I'd said something in 2013, none of this would have happened." "You were protecting me," I said. "I was protecting myself," Thane said. "I didn't want to be the one who broke up your marriage." Margot's hand tightened on his. "You don't apologize for what I hid," Thane said. "I'd spent 30 years thinking I had a good marriage, 2 sons who trusted me, a simple life. Turns out I'd spent 30 years being managed." "It's never your fault," I said. Clover stirred in the stroller. Her eyes opened, and she looked around the cafeteria with the confused expression toddlers get when they wake up in unfamiliar places. "Grandpa," she said, reaching her arms toward me. I stood and lifted her out of the stroller. She was 2 years old, warm and heavy against my chest. Her hair smelled like baby shampoo. She didn't know about DNA tests or paternity percentages or biological fathers who refused to donate. She just knew I was Grandpa. I held her while Thane and Margot watched. "This is what matters," I said. "Before I tell you what Boyd said when he cornered me the next morning, are you still with me? Comment A, if you think Vernon should pressure Bryce anyway, or B, if he should stay silent and find another way. Add one short reason so I can see how you're reading this. Please note what follows contains some recreated details added for storytelling impact, but the lesson is what I hope stays with you." January 10th. 10 o'clock in the morning. I was walking down the third-floor hallway toward Kieran's room when Boyd Lancaster stepped out of the elevator. He wore a charcoal suit, pressed shirt, silver cufflinks that caught the fluorescent light. Mid-50s, clean-shaven, the kind of polished appearance that costs money to maintain. He walked directly toward me with his hand extended. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, "I'm Boyd Lancaster. I represent Bryce Mercer and his family in this case." I didn't shake his hand. "This case," I said, "this is a child needing a transplant, not a case." Boyd lowered his hand. "Of course," he said. "Poor choice of words. I understand emotions are running high." "What do you want?" I asked. "I want to clarify the legal boundaries," Boyd said. His tone was smooth, practiced. "My client has expressed concern about potential harassment." "Harassment," I repeated. "Any direct or indirect pressure on Mr. Mercer to undergo medical testing or procedures could be construed as harassment," Boyd said. "Such actions could negatively impact your rights in any future legal proceedings." I stared at him. "My son is dying," I said. "I understand that's difficult," Boyd said, "but Mr. Mercer has the right to make his own medical decisions without coercion. If you or anyone acting on your behalf contacts him, approaches him, or attempts to influence his decision will be forced to take appropriate legal action. What kind of lawyer warns a father not to contact the man who could save his dying son, the kind who's paid very well? Thank you for the information, I said. I'll speak with my lawyer. Boyd smiled. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. Do you have a lawyer, Mr. Caldwell? He asked. I do now, I said. Boyd handed me a business card. Boyd Lancaster, Partner Lancaster, and Howe Attorneys at Law. An address in Buckhead. Any communication should go through my office, he said. He walked past me toward the elevator. I watched him press the button, watched the doors open, watched him step inside. The trap was perfect. If I contacted Bryce, I'd face harassment charges. If I stayed silent, Bryce would stall indefinitely while Kieran's condition worsened. Boyd had engineered a situation where I lost either way. I pulled out my phone and called Wayne. He answered on the second ring. Boyd Lancaster just warned me not to contact Bryce, I said. Told me any pressure could be harassment. I need a lawyer. Wayne was silent for a second. Then he chuckled softly, not amused but the sound a chess player makes when he sees the board clearly. I know the right person, he said. I didn't ask who. I trusted him the way I should have trusted my instincts 13 years ago. Wayne texted me a name and phone number that afternoon. I saved it in my contacts but didn't call yet. I had something else to figure out first. Wayne had asked me days ago what I was doing in August 2025, and I'd thought he meant the cancer symptoms, but sitting in my truck at 6 p.m. with a notepad and my phone, I realized he'd been asking a different question entirely. I was parked in the hotel lot. My green Chevy Silverado, the one I'd bought used in 2018. The engine was off. The cab smelled like coffee and diesel. I pulled out my phone and called Thane. He answered on the first ring. What do you need? He asked. When was Kieran born? I said. June 14th, 2010, Thane said immediately. Why? Count back 9 months, I said. Silence for 3 seconds. September 2009, Thane said. His voice changed. That's when you worked those night shifts at the factory. I wrote it on the notepad. September 2009, 3 weeks of continuous overnight shifts at the machinery factory because they'd offered double overtime and we needed money for the mortgage. I'd come home at 7 a.m., slept until 2 p.m., left again at 9 p.m. 3 weeks where I barely saw Denise awake. And Brennan, I asked. March 3rd, 2013, Thane said. I counted backward. Early June 2012, we'd just moved to the Cumming house. You were renovating, Thane said quietly, sleeping at the old house for 2 weeks to finish the work before we sold it. I wrote it down. June 2012, 2 weeks sleeping in an empty house 40 minutes away, coming back on weekends to check on Denise and the boys. 2 conceptions, 2 strategic absences. Dad, Thane said, his voice was tight. Mom didn't just hide it, she planned it. I stared at the notepad. The numbers didn't lie. September 2009, June 2012. Both times I'd been gone long enough that paternity wouldn't be questioned. Both times I'd been working to provide for a family that wasn't genetically mine. I have to go, I said. I ended the call and folded the paper. I'd been proud of those night shifts, overtime that paid for Kieran's crib, his first bike, his school clothes. Turns out I'd been paying for my own betrayal. I sat in the truck for 15 minutes doing nothing, just sitting with the weight of it. 2 sons, 2 absences, 13 years of planning. The parking lot was quiet. A few other cars scattered across the asphalt, streetlights beginning to flicker on as the January sun set early. I didn't cry. I didn't hit the steering wheel. I just sat there and let the truth settle into my bones. January 11th, 11 o'clock in the morning, conference room 4A again. The same room where Dr. Sinclair had given me Kieran's DNA results. Gail sat across from me, Dr. Sinclair to her left, Wayne to her right. Gail placed an envelope on the table. Thicker than the first one, more pages inside. We have Brennan's DNA results, she said. I already knew. The timeline had told me everything I needed to know, but knowing and hearing it confirmed are different things. Gail opened the envelope and pulled out 3 pages. The same format as before. Tables, abbreviations, numbers. She slid the first page toward me. Probability of paternity 0.000%. Underlined in red, just like Kieran's. Brennan is not biologically related to you, Gail said. I nodded. I'd expected that. Gail slid the second page toward me. We also ran a sibling analysis, she said, comparing Brennan's genetic markers to Kieran's. I looked at the page. More tables. More numbers I didn't fully understand. What does it say? I asked. The genetic markers suggest Brennan and Kieran may have different biological fathers, Gail said. I stared at her. Different fathers, I repeated. The data isn't conclusive without testing the biological fathers directly, Gail said. But the sibling coefficient is low enough to suggest they don't share the same paternal DNA. 2 different men, while I worked nights and repaired the house and drove school bus routes and paid the mortgage. Who is Brennan's biological father? I asked. Gail looked uncomfortable. Denise hasn't provided that information. Can you compel her to? I asked. Wayne leaned forward. Georgia law keeps biological father information confidential unless it's medically necessary for the child's health. Since Brennan doesn't currently require transplant or genetic treatment, Denise has the right to withhold that information. So I don't get to know, I said. Not unless she chooses to tell you, Wayne said. Or unless a court orders disclosure for legal proceedings. I looked at the DNA results again. 2 sons, 2 different biological fathers, 1 woman who'd managed this for over a decade. How do you tell a 13-year-old boy that his mother lied about his father, his brother might not be his brother, and nothing he knew about his family was real? I want to see Brennan, I said. Alone. I need to tell him the truth myself. Gail exchanged a glance with Wayne. Denise has requested supervised visits only, Gail said. Given the current custody situation and her allegations. What allegations? I asked. Wayne cleared his throat. She filed a motion yesterday requesting temporary full custody, claims you've been emotionally volatile, and that Brennan expressed fear of being alone with you. Because she staged that scene with Nurse Olivia, I said. We know, Wayne said. But legally, she's within her rights to request supervised visits until the custody hearing. I stood, the chair scraped against the floor. No matter what the DNA says, I said Brennan is my son. Gail started to speak, but I kept going. I taught him to ride a bike when he was 6. I sat in the emergency room when he broke his arm at 9. I helped him with algebra homework last year when he couldn't figure out slope-intercept form. I was at every parent-teacher conference, every school play, every baseball game. My voice stayed calm, controlled. I was his father, I said, and I will continue being his father. Wayne nodded slowly. But first, I said, I have to tell him the truth, and I have no idea if he'll believe me over the woman who spent 13 years planning lies. I never got to tell Brennan myself. Denise's custody motion went through before I could arrange the supervised visit, but the truth found its way out anyway. Officer Lyle Barker opened his laptop in the first-floor waiting room and said the 5 words that made every morning of the past 3 months finally make sense. Your bus has exterior cameras. This was January 12th, 9 o'clock in the morning. Lyle was mid-40s, trim-build Atlanta PD uniform with a name badge that caught the overhead lights. He sat across from me with Simone beside him. Margot's colleague filed a report about the January 9th recording, Lyle said. The staged scene with Brennan. Simone nodded. I asked Officer Lyle to check the bus depot cameras. I thought there might be additional evidence. The depot stores exterior footage for 90 days, Lyle said. Your bus number 43 has cameras mounted front and rear. They activate automatically when the door opens. He turned the laptop toward me. I pulled footage from the past 3 months, he said. November through January, watch this. He clicked play. The screen showed the front exterior of my bus. The camera angle captured the street, the sidewalk, and the doorway of my house 40 feet away. Timestamp November 18th, 2025, 7:42 a.m. The front door opened. Brennan stepped out wearing his backpack. Denise appeared behind him, still in her robe. She ran down the steps and bent down close to his ear. Her lips moved for 15 seconds. She glanced toward the bus, then pushed Brennan gently toward the street. Brennan boarded with his face red. He wouldn't look at me. Sat 3 rows back instead of his usual seat behind the driver. I remembered that morning. I'd waved at him through the mirror. He'd turned his face to the window. Lyle clicked to another file. December 3rd, he said. Same scene. Brennan exiting the house, Denise following. This time she held her phone in her left hand pointed toward the bus while she whispered in Brennan's ear with her right hand on his shoulder. Brennan boarded, red-faced, eyes down. December 8th, Lyle said, clicking again. Same pattern. Denise whispering. Phone recording. Brennan boarding without meeting my eyes. December 15th. Again. December 22nd. Again. I have 17 separate instances, Lyle said, all showing the same behavior pattern. Coaching before boarding, often with phone documentation. Simone leaned forward. This is systematic parental alienation, documented over months. I stared at the screen. December 22nd. That was the morning Brennan had walked past me without saying good morning. The morning I'd thought maybe he was upset about a test or an argument with a friend. I'd driven that route 300 mornings, wondering why my son turned his face to the window when I waved. Now I knew she'd been standing in the doorway making sure he did. It wasn't because Brennan hated me, I said. My voice came out quiet, controlled. Someone stood behind him every morning commanding it. Lyle nodded. This footage is admissible in custody proceedings. It establishes a pattern of deliberate parental alienation with intent to document false evidence. I looked at Simone. Thank you. Margot asked me to help, she said. Family helps family. 10:45 that same morning. 4th floor procedure preparation room. I changed into the hospital gown. Thane stood by the window, silent. I emptied my pockets into the clear belongings bag. Wallet, phone, keys to the Silverado, and a small photo creased and faded from 10 years in my wallet. Kieran at 5 years old, sitting on the door sill of bus 43, his legs dangling, his smile wide, his hair messy from the wind. I'd taken that photo on a Saturday in 2015 when I'd brought him to the depot to show him the bus route. 10 years in my wallet, a boy who wasn't my son by blood, a boy I'd loved anyway. I set the photo in the bag and zipped it closed. Thane watched me without speaking. Dr. Farrah Sinclair entered at 11 o'clock. She wore surgical scrubs, her hair covered by a cap, the same silver-rimmed glasses. The surgical team is ready, she said. Kieran is being prepped in the adjacent room. I lay on the bed. The sheets were thin, institutional. The ceiling was white acoustic tile with fluorescent panels. Are you sure? Dr. Farrah asked. I thought about Kieran unconscious in the ICU. I thought about Brennan red-faced on the bus. I thought about Thane at 18 being pushed away. I thought about Margot and Clover. I thought about 15 years driving bus routes and paying mortgages and teaching bike riding and sitting in emergency rooms. I thought about the question I'd been asking myself since Wayne showed me the DNA results. What makes a father? What does a father think about when they're putting him under for bone marrow donation at 57 with 8% complication risk for a child who isn't his? I'm sure, I said. Dr. Farah nodded to the anesthesiologist. Thane stepped forward and squeezed my arm. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I closed my eyes. No matter what the DNA said, I was Kieran's father. Not because genetics decided it. Not because the state of Georgia recognized it, but because I chose it. Every morning for 15 years, I chose it. The anesthetic began to take effect. The room softened. Sounds became distant. I thought about the unanswered question one last time. What makes a father? Not the man who contributes DNA. Not the man who stands in schoolyards with his hand on your wife's back. Not the man who refuses testing when his biological son needs a transplant. A father is the man who shows up. The man who drives the bus route every morning. The man who sits in the emergency room at 2 a.m. The man who teaches algebra and bike riding and how to check tire pressure. The man who lies on a surgical table at 57 with 8% complication risk and says, I'm sure. The darkness pulled me under. The answer came clear as consciousness faded. This. Not genetics, not biology, not court documents or marriage certificates or DNA percentages printed on hospital letterhead. This choice, this sacrifice, this love. This. I woke to white ceiling tiles and the smell of antiseptic. My side ached where they'd extracted the bone marrow. The clock on the wall said 7:30 p.m. Kieran sat beside the bed. Still pale, still thin, IV line still attached to his left arm. But his eyes were clear, focused. His back was straight in the wheelchair they'd brought him down in. Dad, he said, one word. But the way he said it, not the coached monotone from the videos Denise had recorded. Not the distant politeness from the hospital room when she'd been present. Just Dad. I tried to sit up, pain shot through my ribs. Don't move, Kieran said. Dr. Farah said you need to stay flat for 6 hours. Thane stood by the window. He nodded at me but didn't speak. How long have you been here? I asked. My voice came out hoarse. Since 3 o'clock, Kieran said. They wheeled me down while you were still in surgery. I needed to be here when you woke up. He gripped the armrests of the wheelchair. His knuckles were white. Something happened, I said. Yeah, Kieran said. Something happened. He took a breath. They let me take a wheelchair outing this afternoon, he said. Short one, just up and down the third-floor hallway near room 318. I was sitting there when I heard voices from the conference room. The door was open a little. He paused. It was Mom's voice, he said, and Bryce's. I waited. Mom was saying, Bryce signed the papers. After the boy recovers, the divorce proceeds. The plan stays the same. You get Kieran custody per the lawyer's declaration. I need you to sign before the other man wakes up. Kieran's voice stayed steady, controlled, like he'd been practicing how to say it without breaking. The other man, he repeated. That's what she called you. The man who was on an operating table at that exact moment donating bone marrow to save my life. The other man. 15 years old, sitting in a wheelchair with leukemia, and he'd just found out his mother was trading him like property while I was in surgery. I kept listening, Kieran continued. Bryce said, I don't want to raise a child. I agreed to help you legally, but actually raising him? Mom cut him off. She said, then hire someone. You're rich. Kieran's grip on the armrest tightened. My biological father doesn't want me, he said. And my mother's plan was to hand me over to him anyway and let him pay someone else to raise me. Kieran, I started. I'm not finished, he said. He looked directly at me. Uncle Wayne walked past about 5 minutes later. He saw my face. I wasn't crying, but I guess I looked pretty messed up. He asked if I was okay. I said, Uncle Wayne, I need to see Dad. Kieran smiled slightly. He understood immediately, took me to a private room, had me tell him everything I'd heard. He recorded it on his phone. Then he called someone, an attorney, I think, said, we have a new witness. Schedule an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. Wayne recorded your testimony, I said. Yeah, Kieran said. And I told him I wanted to testify in person if it goes to court. I'm 15. Georgia law says I can choose which parent I want to live with. I choose you. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief exactly. Something deeper. I'm sorry, Kieran said suddenly. His voice cracked for the first time. I'm sorry for everything. Those mornings on the bus. All the times I turned away. All the times I wouldn't look at you or talk to you or sit in my usual seat. He gripped my hand. His fingers were cold. I was scared, he said. Mom kept telling me you were angry at me. That you blamed me for things, that you were going to leave and it would be my fault. She'd whisper it every morning before I got on the bus, and I believed her because she's my mom, and I thought moms don't lie about that stuff. How do you thank someone for choosing to be your father when biology said they didn't have to? You don't need to explain anything, I said. My voice was hoarse from the anesthesia. You don't need to apologize. Yes, I do, Kieran said. Because I need you to know I heard what she said today. About you, about her plan. I heard it all, and I need you to know that I see it now. I see what she was doing, what she's been doing for months, maybe years. He took a shaky breath. Are you okay? I asked. I'm okay, he said. Then he smiled, a real smile, the first I'd seen since before the emergency room admission on January 6th. You're the one who needs asking. Are you okay? I smiled back. First time since I'd walked into Scottish Rite Hospital a week ago. I'm okay, I said. Thane moved from the window and put his hand on Kieran's shoulder. Your dad's surgery went well, Thane said. Dr. Farah said the extraction was successful. Clean, no complications. They're already processing the marrow for your transplant. Kieran nodded, then he looked back at me. I want to talk to Brennan, he said. I need to tell him the truth. He deserves to know what Mom's been doing. The coaching, the videos, the lies. His grip on my hand tightened. He thinks you're the bad guy, Kieran said. But you're not. You're the one who showed up. You're the one who donated marrow when my biological father wanted a lawyer before he'd even get tested. You're the one who's been my dad for 15 years. I looked at my son, biologically Bryce Mercer's, legally mine, and by every choice that mattered mine. This is my son, I said quietly. Kieran squeezed my hand. And you're my dad, he said, no matter what any DNA test says. Wayne made it happen 2 hours later. He ensured Denise stayed on the first floor dealing with administrative paperwork. Thane stood outside my recovery room door. Brennan walked into the recovery room at 9 p.m. with the same stiff shoulders he'd carried for 3 months, but Kieran was waiting. And my eldest son had 13 years of being a big brother behind his next words. Little brother, Kieran said from his wheelchair beside my bed. His voice was calmer than you'd expect from a sick 15-year-old who'd spent the past week fighting leukemia. I need to talk to you. Not Mom, not anyone else. Your father and I are talking to you. Brennan stopped 3 feet inside the door. He looked at Kieran, then at me, then back at Kieran. His lips were trembling. It's okay, Kieran said. You're not in trouble. We just need to talk. Brennan nodded slowly. Come sit down, I said. My voice was still hoarse from the anesthesia, but it worked. Brennan sat in the chair by the window, his hands folded in his lap, fingers twisting together. Kieran leaned forward slightly in the wheelchair. I know you're carrying a heavy burden, Kieran said. I know because I carried one too. All those mornings on the bus, all those times I turned away from Dad, I was scared. Brennan looked up. You did those hallway things because you were scared, right? Kieran asked. Not because you hate Dad. Brennan's eyes started to well. He looked down at his hands and nodded slightly. It's okay, Kieran said again. You can tell us. Brennan's voice came out quiet, broken. Mom said if I didn't do it, she wouldn't let me see my friends, he said. She said Dad was leaving and he wouldn't need me anymore. She said if I loved her, I'd help her. And if I didn't help, it meant I didn't love her. 13 years old, and his mother had threatened to take away his friends if he didn't perform rejection on command. What kind of parent does that? I looked at my youngest son biologically, not mine, legally mine, and by every single morning I'd ever woken up to drive a school bus, mine. Brennan, I said, look at me. He looked up, tears on his cheeks. I will never not need you, I said. Do you hear me? I will never not need you. Not today, not next week, not when you're 30. You are my son. That doesn't change. Yes, Brennan whispered. I hear you. I opened my arms. Brennan stood and walked to the bed. He hugged me tight, his whole body trembling. I felt the wetness of his tears through my hospital gown. Kieran watched from the wheelchair. His eyes were red, but he was smiling. First time in months we'd been a family. January 13th, 10 o'clock in the morning, the large conference room on the 4th floor. I sat in a wheelchair. Wayne had insisted. My side still ached from the donation procedure, and Dr. Farah had said I needed to stay off my feet for another 48 hours. The attorney Wayne had recommended sat at the head of the table, mid-50s gray suit briefcase full of documentation. Denise sat on one side with Boyd Lancaster. Bryce sat beside them, arms crossed. Wayne Gale and Officer Lyle sat on my side. The attorney laid out the evidence piece by piece. Appointment cancellation records from August through November 2025. Patient portal email change dated August 15th. Screenshots showing every cancellation made within hours of being scheduled. Guardianship change document dated November 28th, 2025, Thanksgiving Day. Bus depot camera footage. 17 separate instances of Denise coaching Brennan before school. The attorney played 3 clips on a laptop. November 18th, December 3rd, December 15th. Each one showing the same pattern whisper push phone recording. Photographs from the 2022 open house and 2023 summer party. Bryce Mercer clearly visible hand on Denise's back in one photo, standing in the schoolyard in another. Bank transaction records. Transfer of funds to Vitality Circle, LLC, December 12, 2025. Linked to Roxanne Bentley, linked to Stryker Medical Devices, linked to Bryce Mercer. Kieran's sworn testimony from January 12th evening. Recorded statement describing what he'd overheard in the conference room, the custody plan, the divorce timeline, Bryce's reluctance to raise a child, Denise's instruction to hire someone. Boyd's face stayed neutral through most of it. Professional, detached. But when the attorney finished and closed the folder, I saw Boyd's jaw tighten. They thought evidence would change minds, but I knew better. It just changed the cost of refusing. Bryce looked at Denise, searching for an escape route. Boyd leaned close to Bryce and whispered. I couldn't hear the exact words, but I saw Bryce's expression change from defiant to calculating. Later, Wayne told me what Boyd had said. If you continue refusing compatibility testing and the child dies, you'll be the first media target. Get tested. It's the only way out. Not conscience, not care for Kieran, strategic damage control. Bryce stood. He buttoned his jacket with precise movements. I want to cooperate with the hospital on compatibility testing, he said to Gale. I'll make myself available for whatever procedures are necessary. His voice was smooth, corporate, the same tone he'd used when he'd first walked off the elevator 10 days ago. Self-preservation dressed up as cooperation. Boyd smiled at me across the conference table. A small smile. Professional. As if he'd helped. As if we were all on the same team now. I looked back without smiling. He hadn't helped me. He'd saved his client from a public relations disaster. He'd calculated that the cost of refusing was higher than the cost of cooperating. He'd done the math and chosen the option with lower legal exposure. Two different things entirely. Gail nodded. We can begin testing this afternoon. The lab is ready. Bryce nodded. Denise sat silent. Her face was pale composed. She didn't look at me. Didn't look at Wayne or Gail or the attorney, just stared at the table. The meeting ended at 10:30. Wayne wheeled me out of the conference room. We passed the elevator and I saw Bryce and Boyd waiting for the doors to open. Boyd's hand on Bryce's shoulder, still talking quietly. Still strategizing. You got what you needed, Wayne said as we reached the hallway. I got Bryce's agreement to test, I said. That's not the same thing. Wayne was quiet for a moment. No, he said finally. It's not. Boyd and Bryce took the elevator. Gail and the attorney left through the stairwell. Wayne wheeled me toward the recovery wing. Everyone left the conference room, and it was just the two of us in the empty hallway with morning sunlight through the window. 18 years of marriage down to this moment with no lawyers between us. Denise stood by the wall near the corner, alone. No Boyd coaching her, no Bryce standing beside her, no phone in her hand recording evidence. Just a woman who'd lived with me for 18 years and planned my replacement for at least 13. I looked at her. She looked back. Two people who'd shared a house, a bed, a mortgage, 2 sons, and a lifetime of lies. She didn't have the calculated expression I'd seen in the conference room. No strategic tears, no performance, just the weary exhaustion of someone who'd been carrying something too heavy for too long and finally had no strength left to hold it. I'm sorry, she said. Not honey, not sweetheart, just 2 words in an empty hallway. You're sorry for what I asked. My voice wasn't angry, wasn't cold, just asking for clarity. She took a breath. For everything, she said. Bryce, the money, the paperwork, the appointments I canceled, the guardianship I changed on Thanksgiving, the way I coached Brennan, the videos. She paused. Her voice broke. For letting our child get sicker when we could have caught it earlier. Our child, not the boy, not Kieran, our child. I watched her face. This wasn't strategic remorse. This was the first time I'd seen Denise cry real tears, not the performance she'd given Dr. Sinclair in the consultation room, not the manipulation she'd staged with Nurse Olivia. Real crying. I sat in the wheelchair and let her apology linger in the air. I didn't rush to accept it. Didn't rush to reject it. Just let the silence hold the weight of 18 years. I know you're sorry, I said finally, but that won't erase anything. I know, she said. 18 years I'd believed in one version of our marriage. 3 weeks to learn the truth. 5 minutes in this hallway to decide what came next. But the children still need you as their mother, I said. She looked at me. Can you forgive me? She asked. I thought about it. Really thought about it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I could help raise the children with her. I could build some version of co-parenting that didn't require forgiveness but didn't destroy what was left. That's what I could do. I don't know, I said. But I know they need both of us. So we'll figure out what that looks like. She nodded slowly. Thank you, she whispered. I didn't respond. Wayne wheeled me past her toward the elevator. January 17th, 4 days after the conference room meeting. They transfused my bone marrow into Kieran's body at 10 a.m. in a procedure room on the 3rd floor. I sat in the adjacent recovery room and watched through the window as the medical team connected the IV line and began the slow drip. Dr. Farah had explained it would take 48 hours to know if my marrow would engraft and begin producing healthy cells. 48 hours of waiting to see if my choice, my sacrifice, would actually save him. I was able to sit up from day 2 post-surgery. The pain in my side had lessened to a dull ache. I spent most of those 48 hours in the chair by the window watching Kieran sleep while nurses checked monitors every 2 hours. January 19th, day 3. Dr. Farah entered Kieran's room at 9 a.m. I'd learned to read her face over the past 2 weeks. This time she wasn't stressed, wasn't tense. Early indicators show the marrow is starting to function, she said. White blood cell count is rising. That's a good sign. I looked at Kieran. He was asleep, but his face didn't look as pale as it had a week ago. The grayish tint was fading. How good? I asked. Too early to call it a success, Dr. Farah said. But the trajectory is promising. We'll monitor closely for the next week. I nodded. She left and I wheeled closer to Kieran's bed. My marrow, in his body, keeping him alive. Not because biology said I had to, because I chose to. That afternoon, Thane and Margot brought Clover to visit. Clover had been carrying a yellow plastic flower since the first day I'd been admitted, one of those cheap toys from a dollar store. She'd held it during visiting hours, slept with it at the hotel, refused to let anyone take it. She walked into Kieran's room with a serious expression 2-year-olds get when they're doing something important. She stood beside the bed and placed the yellow flower carefully on Kieran's pillow. Kieran opened his eyes. He looked at the flower, then at Clover. Thank you, Clover, he said. His voice was hoarse but clear. Clover nodded seriously. Thane laughed. Margot covered her mouth, smiling. I watched from the wheelchair and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Something gentle. Something real. A 2-year-old's plastic flower held more truth than all the legal documents sometimes love, is just knowing when to give what you've been holding. Kieran looked at me. Color was returning to his face. His eyes were brightening. Dad, he said, how do you feel? I looked at my son. 15 years old. biologically Bryce Mercer's, legally mine, and by every choice that mattered, by the bone marrow now functioning in his body, by the wheelchair I'd sat in for 3 days, watching him sleep, by the decision I'd made at 57 with 8% complication risk mine. "Dad's fine, buddy," I said. "Fine." Kieran's recovery continued steadily over the following days. Day 4 showed continued improvement in his blood counts. Day 5, he sat up without assistance for the first time. Day 6, he ate solid food and kept it down. Wayne spread the DNA confirmation papers on his desk 3 days after my marrow started working in Kieran's body, and I learned what biology said versus what fatherhood meant, 2 completely different things. January 20th, 10 o'clock in the morning. Wayne's office in the hospital administrative wing. The room was small functional. A desk, 4 chairs, filing cabinets against the wall. Dr. Farah sat beside me. "Bryce Mercer confirmed as Kieran's biological father," Wayne said. He placed the first page on the desk between us. No surprises there. I looked at the document, official hospital letterhead at the top, tables of genetic markers, numbers I still didn't fully understand, but one line was clear: probability of paternity 99.99%, typed, printed, signed by a geneticist whose name I didn't recognize. It didn't change anything. I'd known since Dr. Sinclair had shown me the first DNA results weeks ago, but seeing the confirmation made it formal, final, written in permanent record. "And Brennan?" I asked. Wayne slid a second page across the desk. "Brennan is not related to Bryce Mercer by blood," he said. "Different biological father entirely. 2 sons, 2 different men, years of strategic planning by a woman I'd thought I knew." I nodded, slowly processing what I already suspected. "The hospital ran additional screening as part of the standard protocol," Dr. Farah said. "When paternity questions arise in medical contexts, we document all relevant biological relationships. Brennan's biological father information is documented in our system, but it's kept in confidential medical records under Georgia state law." "What does that mean exactly?" I asked. "It means the information can only be disclosed under specific circumstances," Wayne explained. "If there's a direct medical need, like if Brennan required a transplant and we needed to contact potential biological donors for compatibility testing, or if a court issues an order for disclosure. Otherwise, the records remain sealed." I thought about that for a moment. A name locked in a file somewhere. A man who didn't know he had a 13-year-old son, or maybe he did know. I had no way of finding out. "Can I request disclosure?" I asked. "You could petition the court," Wayne said, "but given the current custody situation and the lack of immediate medical necessity, a judge would likely deny the petition. The law is designed to protect privacy until necessity demands truth." "I don't need to know right now," I said. "If Brennan needs to know when he's grown, he can decide for himself whether to pursue it." Wayne nodded. "That's his right under Georgia law. When he turns 18, he can request access to his own medical records." "How do you tell a 13-year-old boy his biological father's name is locked in a file cabinet under state law, and that might be the kindest thing anyone's ever done for him?" January 21st, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Kieran sat in the chair beside Brennan's bed in room 318. He'd asked Wayne to arrange private time with his brother before Denise's scheduled meeting at 2:30. I wasn't in the room. Wayne told me later what Kieran had said. He'd stood outside the door close enough to hear if needed, but far enough to give them privacy. "There's a man named Bryce," Kieran had said, his voice calm, measured. "He's my biological father. The DNA tests proved it yesterday. You're different, Mom's going to explain that part when she comes in a little while. But the most important thing you need to know is this: the father of both of us, the man recovering upstairs from donating bone marrow to save my life, is our real father. Biology doesn't change that. Nothing changes that." Brennan's eyes had been red, Wayne said. "You don't hate Mom, do you?" Brennan had asked. Kieran had shaken his head slowly. "I don't know," he'd said. "Honestly, I don't know how I feel about her right now, but I know I don't want to hate her. That's the best I can do." Honest confusion instead of forced forgiveness or permanent anger. Room for healing without pretending the wounds weren't deep. 2:30 that afternoon, Denise entered room 318 with Wayne as witness. I stood in the hallway outside about 10 feet from the door. The door was closed, but I could see through the narrow window set at eye level. Denise sat in the chair between the 2 beds. Kieran remained in his wheelchair. Brennan sat on the edge of his mattress, legs dangling. She spoke. I couldn't hear the words through the heavy door, but I watched her face. Not the calculated expression from the conference rooms, not the strategic tears from the hospital consultations, not the performance she'd given Nurse Olivia, just a mother telling her children difficult truths. Kieran nodded slowly, taking it in. Brennan started crying. His shoulders shook. Denise reached for him, hesitant at first, and he let her. He leaned forward and hugged his mother and cried into her shoulder while she held him. Kieran watched from his wheelchair. His face was unreadable, guarded. Denise said something else. Both boys looked at her, waited. She was crying too now, real tears running down her face. I watched my sons through the glass, one recovering from leukemia, with my marrow keeping him alive, one recovering from his mother's systematic lies, and realized healing doesn't need words sometimes. Sometimes it just needs time and truth and the willingness not to walk away. The conversation lasted 20 minutes. When it ended, Denise stood slowly and walked to the door. Wayne followed her out into the hallway. She didn't look at me as she passed, just kept walking toward the elevator, her face wet with tears. Wayne stopped beside me. She told her lawyer the whole thing, he whispered quietly, for the divorce proceedings and custody arrangements. Bryce wasn't the only one during that time period. There were others, multiple relationships over the years, but Bryce was the one she thought most useful financially and legally. That's why she chose him to pursue. Strategic selection, not passion, not love, not even attraction, calculated usefulness. I looked at Wayne. The others, I asked, did she provide names? No, Wayne said. Just confirmed there were multiple relationships during the periods you'd calculated. September 2009, June 2012, other times too, apparently. I nodded, feeling nothing shift inside. Just confirmation of what I already knew. The room door opened. Kieran saw me standing in the hallway. He didn't say anything, didn't ask if I'd heard what happened inside, didn't explain or apologize or defend his mother or himself. He just nodded once. I nodded back. That silent acknowledgement between us was enough, more than enough. That silent nod in the hallway became the foundation for what came next. The joint custody papers sat on the mediation table waiting for Denise to fight me, but when she walked in with her attorney 3 days after Kieran's nod in the hospital hallway, she didn't look like someone preparing for war. January 23rd, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Attorney's office conference room in downtown Atlanta. Neutral territory. My attorney sat to my left. Denise's attorney sat across the table. Denise sat beside him, hands folded. Boyd Lancaster wasn't there. He'd withdrawn from representation after Bryce was no longer his preferred client. The mediator outlined the proposed custody arrangement. Joint legal custody, primary physical custody alternating weekly, holiday schedule split equitably, standard arrangement. I waited for Denise to object, to argue, to demand modifications. She looked at the mediator and said, I agree to everything. Her attorney looked surprised. Mrs. Caldwell, he said, we discussed potential adjustments to the visitation schedule. I don't want adjustments, Denise said. She looked directly at me for the first time since entering the room. I want the children to have their father, their real father, the one who was here. The mediator made notes. My attorney reviewed the financial settlement, division of assets, house incoming to be sold proceeds split, retirement accounts divided, no alimony requested by either party. Denise agreed to all of it. 20 minutes later, I signed the custody agreement. My signature looked the same as it always had. Vernon Caldwell, 57 years old, school bus driver, father. The feeling wasn't victory, it was fairness. I didn't get everything, but I got the most important thing both parents in the children's lives: structure, stability. Late January brought news about the others. Roxanne Bentley was prosecuted for wire fraud. The funds transferred to Vitality Circle, LLC, an entity with no business operations, no employees, no legitimate purpose. The case would extend into the following year, but the charges were filed. Real charges, real consequences. Bryce Mercer was terminated from his consulting contract with Stryker Medical Devices after the conflict of interest was revealed. The Georgia State Bar opened an investigation into whether he and Boyd had colluded to write scripted testimony designed to avoid legal liability while refusing medical cooperation. The investigation would take years. Denise's parental alienation and medical negligence were documented in the custody proceeding records. The findings would follow her. If she violated the joint custody arrangement, if she coached the children again, if she interfered with my relationship with them, the documented history would affect any future trials. Justice in real life isn't a gavel coming down and everyone in handcuffs. It's wire fraud charges that take 18 months, bar investigations that last years, custody findings that accumulate quietly in files. Slow, real, permanent. January 28th, 6 o'clock in the evening. Kieran had been granted short hospital leave for the first time since admission. 4 hours, enough for dinner. Thane made a reservation at a small restaurant 2 blocks from Scottish Rite. Nothing fancy. Burgers and fries, booths with red vinyl seats. Table for 6. Clover sat in a wooden high chair at the end. Kieran wore a green hoodie thinner than he'd been 3 weeks ago, but with bright eyes and color in his face. Brennan wore an Atlanta Falcons tracksuit. Margot sat beside Thane. I sat at the head of the table. The first genuine family dinner in I couldn't remember how long. It was eventless. That was the beautiful part. It was completely, utterly eventless. Thane argued with Kieran about the Atlanta Falcons' chances next season. Kieran said they'd win 6 games. Thane said 8 minimum. They went back and forth for 10 minutes about quarterback stats and defensive line depth. Brennan ate all of Clover's fries when she wasn't looking. Clover noticed. She pointed her little finger at Brennan's face and said something in 2-year-old language that sounded like scolding. Margot covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. Brennan sheepishly pushed his own fries toward Clover's plate. Simple, ordinary, family chaos. I sat there watching them and thought about dinners 15 years ago at the Cumming house. The dining room table that sat 8, the matching plates Denise had picked out, the careful way everyone sat in assigned seats. I'd thought those dinners were normal, real, the picture of what a family looked like. But that normalcy had been built on lies, careful construction, strategic performance. This dinner in a cheap restaurant 2 blocks from a hospital, at a table that wobbled slightly with 5 people who weren't related to me by blood, was real. What makes a family dinner real? The house you eat it in, the blood in everyone's veins, or the fact that nobody there would rather be anywhere else? Kieran laughed at something Thane said. The sound was clear, genuine. The first time I'd heard him laugh in weeks. Brennan tried to steal another fry from Clover. She guarded her plate with both hands. Margot reached across the table and squeezed my hand briefly. Didn't say anything, just squeezed once and let go. I looked around the table. My eldest son who'd been pushed away by his mother at 18, his partner who'd become family through choice, their daughter who called me grandpa and meant it, my son recovering from leukemia with my bone marrow keeping him alive, my youngest son learning that family isn't defined by genetics. Not perfect, not enough people, not in a private home around a dining room table, but real. Clover looked up at me with those serious 2-year-old eyes. "Grandpa," she said, "want more fries?" I took one from her plate. "Yes," I said. She nodded contentedly, like I'd passed some important test. I smiled. I'd been asking myself the same question since Wayne first showed me the DNA results. What makes a father? What makes a family? The answer was sitting right here at this table. Not genetics, not biology, not court documents or marriage certificates or houses with 8-seat dining tables. This choice, this sacrifice, this love, this moment with a 2-year-old offering fries and a 15-year-old laughing and a 13-year-old trying to steal food and a 30-year-old son who never stopped being my son even when his mother tried to push him away. This is family. That dinner at the restaurant became the first of many. Not every week, not perfectly scheduled, but regular enough to matter. Kieran walked out of Scottish Rite Hospital on a cold January morning wearing a navy blue jacket and carrying everything that mattered in a small bag on his shoulder, and I pushed the backup wheelchair behind him just in case, but he didn't need it. Late January. The exact date doesn't matter. What mattered was the cold but sunny morning, the way Kieran sat in the wheelchair outside the hospital doors one last time, then stood slowly, carefully, and walked the final 30 steps to the car on his own 2 feet. Thane clapped. Brennan shouted, "Yeah!" Clover mimicked him, shouting, "Yeah!" without knowing why, just because her cousin did. Margot held the car door open. I stood beside the wheelchair I didn't need anymore and watched my son walk. Kieran stopped before getting in the car. He turned and looked at me. "Dad," he said. "Yes. I've wanted to save this for a long time," he said. His voice was steady, clear. "You didn't save me because you're my biological father. You saved me because you chose to, and that's what matters." 15 years old. Articulating the truth I'd been learning since Wayne first showed me those DNA results. "Dad knows already," I said. Kieran smiled. "I know you know, but I wanted to say it anyway." He got in the car. I folded the wheelchair and put it in the trunk. I thought about 15 years of morning bus routes, the photo I'd carried in my wallet for 10 years, the signature I'd written in the procedure room before the donation, the words typed on hospital letterhead, probability of paternity 0.000%. All the things DNA can't measure. Choice, sacrifice, love, presence. The decision to show up every single morning whether biology says you have to or not. We drove home together, January 30th. I returned to work. The doctor had cleared me. The recovery from the donation was complete. 8% complication risk, and I'd landed in the 92% who walked away fine. Morning route, final stop at Laurel Creek Street. Early Georgia winter light filtered through the windshield. I sat behind the wheel of the yellow bus, door open, waiting. 15 years I'd been driving this route, and in 15 years I'd never understood that every child getting on this bus was carrying a story I'd never see just like mine. Brennan stood at the stop. Green jacket, black backpack, headphones around his neck, not on his ears. The bus stopped. The door opened. Brennan looked up. He met my eyes. He didn't turn away, didn't look down, didn't perform the coached rejection his mother had whispered into his ear for months. He got on the bus. "Hi, Dad," he said. 2 words, not memorized, not scripted, not rehearsed in front of a bathroom mirror or recorded on a phone for evidence. Just Brennan's choice. "Hi, son," I said. "Sit down." He walked down the aisle and took his seat, 3 rows back on the right, his usual spot. I closed the bus door. The yellow warning lights flashed. I started the route. In the rearview mirror, I watched Brennan sit down, take out his headphones, put them on, and tap his fingers lightly against his knee to whatever music was playing. Normal. Simply beautifully, unremarkably normal. No drama, no script, no manipulation. Just a 13-year-old boy listening to music on the way to school. Kieran came home at the end of February. Still weak, still recovering, but home. The doctor said his prognosis was good. My marrow had engrafted successfully. His body was producing healthy cells. Brennan stopped rehearsing his responses. He talked to me like a son talks to his father. Sometimes annoyed, sometimes grateful, always genuine. Thane, Margot, and Clover became what they'd always been, family. Not by blood, by choice. Denise handled the divorce paperwork without drama. We didn't become friends. We didn't reconcile. We just became 2 people who used to be married and now had to raise children together. No hatred, no warfare, just an ending. Bryce, I don't know where he is now. I don't care. He's not part of this story anymore. What I learned is this: DNA doesn't make you a father. It makes you a biological contributor. Fatherhood is the choice you make every single morning when you wake up and decide to show up. So I ask you, what makes a father? What makes a mother? What makes a family? Not the biological documents in a file cabinet. Not the name typed on birth certificates. Not the genetic markers analyzed in a hospital lab. What is it? I can tell you what it was for me. It was the signature on a donation consent form at 57 years old. It was the decision to give bone marrow despite 8% complication risk. It was the choice to love a child who didn't share my DNA. But your answer might be different. Maybe it's the parent who adopted you when you were 3. Maybe it's the grandparent who raised you when your biological parents couldn't. Maybe it's the stepfather who showed up to every baseball game. Maybe it's the aunt who took you in when you had nowhere else to go. Tell me your story, because I've learned that family isn't one definition, it's not one path, it's not written in genetics or determined by biology. It's written in choices. I am a school bus driver. Every morning I stop the bus, open the doors, and let children on board. I never know what story waits behind each face, what homes they're leaving, what secrets they carry, what love defines them beyond biology. But I know one thing for certain, I will take them where they need to go. That's my job. That's me. And to you listening to my story, remember this family isn't something you're born into. It's something you choose every single day. I spent 15 years thinking biology defined me as a father. I was wrong. The DNA test that said 0.000% didn't change anything about who Kieran and Brennan were to me. What changed was my understanding. Don't make my mistake of waiting for a crisis to realize what really matters. Fatherhood isn't in your genetics. It's in showing up. I learned that being a father means choosing sacrifice over comfort, choosing love over bitterness, choosing presence over pride. When that hospital called and I had to decide whether to donate bone marrow to a son who wasn't mine by blood, I finally understood the truth that love isn't measured in DNA percentages. It's measured in the choices we make when everything is on the line. The biological father hired a lawyer. I signed the consent form. That's the difference between genetics and fatherhood. So, here's what I want to know from you: what defines family in your life? Leave a comment below and share your story. If this message touched you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe to this channel. These stories matter because your experiences matter. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. Your time means everything. One final note. Some details in this story have been adapted or fictionalized for storytelling purposes, but the core truth that family is defined by choice and love, not biology, remains unchanged. God bless you.